Hello and welcome to Too Fast, Too Forever. There's all kinds of family, we chose this one. This is episode 114, Too Fast, Too Furious, Lap 7. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Joe too, and this episode is brought to you by Garden of Life doctor-formulated brain health to sharpen your memory and focus. Clean, clinically studied, whole food ingredients to support brain health at 3 stages of life. Shout out Garden of Life. Doctor-formulated brain health.
Ooh, shout out Garden of Life. Welcome back to the show. After the break, we'll be joined by Nico, Vasilo, and Kevo Risse of Husbands Talking More or Less to talk about Too Fast, Too Furious. But first, Joe, extracurricular activities. What have you been up to since we last chatted?
Hockey came back. That's what I did. That's what I'm doing. Actually, currently I have it on the background now. Penguins lost last night in their first game, but they actually looked good. I'm not sad about it. And you know what? It's fucking sober season. And I was drinking beers last night. I think this is my fault that they lost.
Oh, wow. Okay,
I know. I had to calm my nerves because I literally was nauseous before the game last night. Like,
really?
I swear to God. Like, I was so...
So they're not calling this the playoffs. What are they calling it? They're calling it some weird thing.
So they expanded the playoff teams, and they're
having... It's like a play-in round.
It's a qualifier round. So these are best of 5 series, not best of 7. Teams that were ranked 5 through 12 playing each other, and usually it's just the top 8 teams make it to the playoffs. So we would have made it. We're the 5th ranked team, so we would have made it normally to the playoffs. We're the strongest team that has to compete in this. From the beginning of the season, I was saying, like, I like the team, I like our depth, but we were just, like, crushed by injuries. We lucked out so hard because of the pandemic. Like, one of our best players who had, like, shoulder surgery in January wasn't due back until, like, he wasn't going to come back until May, right? They were like, maybe we'll get him back late in the playoffs. I think the team looks great. They have, like, more depth than they ever... It's, like, one of the best teams we've actually had in years. Like, better than the teams that we won the cup with. So that's why I'm nervous. Okay. Realistically, like, this should be it. Last night, Montreal played the best game they could play against us, and it went to overtime, and they won in overtime. On a long enough timeline, like, even, like, all the analytics were, like, the Penguins had, like, 60% of the scoring chances, 60% of possession.
Well, you know they got a mandate, right? They got to win or lose in 4. That's the mandate.
Yeah, yeah. The short series kind of freaks me out, because, like, in a best-of-7 series, like, I always say
the better team should win, yes.
The better team's gonna win. Right? Like, on a long enough timeline, like, if you play, like, best of 7, you're going to win. To get 3, you could kind of sneak 1 or 2.
They already snuck 1, yeah.
They already snuck 1.
2 and 4, yep. Mm-hmm.
It's making me anxious. But also, this is the coolest thing. Sidney Crosby, our captain, his number 87, he's number 87 because he was born on 8/7. This is the first time in his life that he will get to play hockey on his birthday.
Oh, very cool. Okay, that's very cool.
Them losing, if they would have won in 3, he wouldn't have gotten to play on his birthday. Now, there's a game sanctioned for his birthday. He's, 1, crazy superstitious, and 2, he, like, always kind of plays really good. Like, first game back after an injury, he, like, averages 4 points a game. You know what I mean? So it's always, like, he, like, has these certain, like, momental games that he has. They play Monday night, so this comes out Tuesday. Hopefully Tuesday morning I'll be better and happier than I am today. So,
well, we record the next episode on Tuesday night, not Wednesday night like normal, so we will have an update for the next episode, of course, because this is what better way to get out of date sports information than on a podcast days later. So
about Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Anything else that you've been up to since Wednesday?
Rachel made brownies from scratch for me, so that was really nice. They turned out great. I think that this is like a brownie recipe that, like, I enjoy, and I'm done. It was like half granulated sugar, half powdered sugar. We used yogurt in them, which I always like to do, like using yogurt instead of water or milk. They came out really good. And I'm just stoked that I get hockey back and it's on all day, every day for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So
baseball is back, even though baseball is now maybe in jeopardy. Who knows?
Baseball's wrecked, dude. It's not going to last. Football's going to be fucked, too. I saw a bunch of Steelers tested positive or like a couple of them tested positive for COVID.
Well, like, high-profile guys are opting out. Like, C.J. Mosley just opted out today or yesterday for the Jets. Stafford, the Lions quarterback, got put on the COVID list, I think because his wife is pregnant. I don't think that he got tested, but I think it's just because he's a high risk or whatever. So
okay.
If baseball does not go well, and baseball has not gone well, but we'll see. Football, yeah. Football's going to be worse. So
I was talking to my boss because I had a meeting with him. He like has dealt with a lot of this COVID stuff. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of his buddies are like on the board for Connecticut to reopen. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So I was like, okay, realistically, you think we're gonna have football this year? And he was like, no. just so say like we were talking about it. I was like, did you see this thing that happened in NFL or whatever? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, do you think we're gonna have football this year? He's like, I don't think it's gonna happen. I was like, okay.
I mean, I was worried forever about baseball next year, like let alone this
Yeah.
year. Like it just there's so many things that need to go right. And apparently, so the latest from the Athletic on the Marlins, and if people are not following, like 16, I think Marlins players and staff got
Yes.
tested positive. At
Yeah.
least 16, maybe 18, maybe more. It seems like they did not go out on the town. It just seems like they weren't policing themselves the right way. Like they were just hanging out without masks and like in bigger groups than they should have been. They think there's like a super spreader who like gave it to most of them or whatever. But it
Makes
seems like
sense. Yeah.
it's nothing like wildly like they're not all going out partying and drinking or whatever.
They weren't at Magic
It's like
City. Yeah.
somebody got it from someone and then they were staying together, but they were staying together in a way that like the league or the players association or whatever said don't do that. So there's so many things to keep in mind, to keep in check, that it's hard to. I've heard things like anonymous players saying, quote unquote, anonymous players saying, if a team can't keep their shit together, just
They're
have the
done.
franchise forfeit the season, right?
Yeah.
So like, you shouldn't punish the other 29 teams, or like the Phillies. Maybe like there were rumors that the Phillies caught stuff from the Marlins, but it turns out that like their 3 positives, 2 were false positives, and 1 was not from the Marlins probably. Then the Cardinals got it somehow, but the Cardinals were following every precaution. So like,
But they also were supposed to be at the casino, apparently. Did you hear that rumor?
I don't really believe any of that. Like, I don't think
yeah.
that. Like, I think if that was true, we would have heard more about it.
If you have a bunch of baseball players that show up to a casino, somebody, even in masks, somebody's going to recognize them, right?
Yeah.
Like,
As this episode comes out, yesterday's episode of Slumber Party is one that you're on, which we can talk about a little bit more maybe next time. That was the Lifetime movie, the Babysitter movie. I watched Brian's Friday movie, which I was not involved with, but his movie called Society, which is on Amazon Prime, which is like this crazy creature feature kind of horror movie
Interesting.
that Mike, and he had a new guest on, Galen, they talked about this movie. The movie's insane. Like, I don't know how people are not talking about this movie all the time. It's a very creepy, gross out, practical, physical effects movie that I really loved, and they all loved it on the podcast too. So it was a
Cool.
fun conversation, a fun movie to watch. And I will also say that I finally, I mean, I knew I was always going to love it, I just needed to get around to it. I watched Middleditch and Schwartz, and of course I loved it.
yeah, right?
Which of the 3 was your favorite? The wedding, or the law school, or the job interview? Do you remember which one you liked best?
Wedding and law school, I think, were the best. And wedding might be the funniest with, like, Short, what was his name? Like, Short Gary or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I think I like Wedding best. I watched Wedding like maybe 2 weeks ago, and then I watched the other 2 this weekend. I liked Wedding best. I think maybe, I don't know if it was because like I didn't know, like I knew what to expect because I heard them talk about it
Yeah.
on a few different podcasts, right? I heard Ben Schwartz on a couple, I think. So I knew how they shot it and like why it's, I know inherently why it's difficult to bring to the screen, and like how
so
they spent all
hard.
the money doing it, and like it worked well. So I knew practically how they, but I think just seeing it, I was like, oh, this is better than I thought it was going to be, even though like I
Yes.
trust them.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. If you haven't seen it yet, it's 3 long-form narrative improv stories that just the two of
so
them
funny.
make up everything on the spot. They're all 50 or so minute episodes. It's all on Netflix. Like, the funniest thing, the funniest thing is always them forgetting who they are or what the characters' names are, or just, like, breaking, it's wonderful.
Them forgetting the names and then being like, and then one of them remembering that, like, they said that they were a different person before, and they're like, well, who's Christy then?
Yep,
And he's
yep.
like, oh, I'm the other sister. And you're like, oh, okay. And then they're like, well, then they added another character, so now that there's, like, Christy and Tiffany or whatever.
If you have not seen that yet, Joe talked about it probably like a month ago or so, like when it came out, but
Yeah.
maybe even longer. I don't know. Time is weird. I think that's it. I've been watching basketball, watching baseball, watching that. Anything else that I've done? Oh, I started rewatching The Leftovers, for something I will talk about down the line. But do you remember when Jordan was here, we talked about, we watched a Looney Tunes short, The Fast and the Furious, like from 1949, was a Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah.
I did not realize that was the first installment of the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. And the reason I bring it up now is because it's on a TV in the first episode of The Leftovers. And like,
What?
for a show that basically by the time it ended, I was like, they're making this explicitly for me. Like everything that they're doing, all the music choices, all the weirdness,
Yeah.
everything, like the narrative decisions, Everything they're doing is like, hey, here's a show that is exactly made for you. For a Fast and Furious reference to be in the pilot, I was like, oh man, like, how did I not know this? But I was just blown away
I
by
love The
that. I
Leftovers.
just love it. I love it.
What was it, only 3 or 4 seasons? 3?
Three. It's 28 episodes. It's 10, 10, and 8.
The first season was excellent. The second one I like kind of trudged through and I stopped, and you reinstated that, like, you gave the strong recommendation that I should get through it and go to 3, and we did, and we finished it, and we were like, that was an excellent show. So
Oh, well, I mean, I think 2 is the best. I mean, one is the book. The first season is the book, not verbatim, but like basically the
Yeah.
book. And then 2 and 3 just get real weird with it because there's only the one book, and then they're like, okay, let's move the setting.
it kind of feels like The Wire-ish to me, that like they had like season 1 that you're like, okay, this is what it is, and then season 2 they kind of like diverge, and they diverge a little too hard, and then season 3 kind of comes back.
I don't know. I get what you're saying. I don't agree. Like
Okay.
I understand like it's different, but I think it wraps it up well. If that
It
you know
does.
it's a well constructed show, but I don't
It's
think
very
that 2
well-constructed.
doing what it did, it all works better than like the docs. Like people don't love the docs. People are like, what the
True,
fuck's the docs?
that's fair. I was, yeah, I get it. That was too rough of a comparison, but for what I was saying, it's just like the divergence, and then it kind of comes back to the people and stuff that you wanted to see about.
But that's it. So, I mean, if you have not seen I don't know that I would recommend The Leftovers to everyone. Again, it is my favorite show of all time, but it is very fucking bleak. It is very bleak, and
Really?
it gets very, very funny. Oh, yeah, yeah. The whole show is an existential crisis, like breakdown.
I guess maybe I just didn't see it in that weird light, because like the whole premise of the fucking show is that like half the population dies or something, right? Like
2% disappear.
2% just like rapture.
It's not the rapture, but they disappear, yes.
Yeah, I didn't find it super bleak. I mean, like, there's people dealing with grief of like losing someone, but it's not. Yeah, I guess maybe
Wait,
it is.
what do you consider bleak? Because it is like existentially like everything. Like, what do we do now? That's the whole point of the show. So, what do you think is bleak? If that's not bleak, what is bleak to you?
That doesn't bother me though. That's not like
Because like every time I say like something or like depressing or bleak, you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. But like if you don't think this is bleak, then the other things I say are bleak are not actually
No,
bleak. So I'm
dude.
just wondering, what do you consider bleak if the Leftovers is not?
individual suffering tugs at my heartstrings. In a case where everybody is dealing with it and 2% of the population died, in watching that, I can relate to it, but it's not as like we're following like one person who's just getting shit on over and over and over. I mean, you kind of are in the show, but like,
Because it is that. Because that's Nora. Like Nora.
Yes.
That's like what you're talking about is Nora.
yes.
It's fascinating. Fascinating to me.
Sorry. Yeah, man. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all I've been doing. Just again, watching more things. Haven't gone anywhere. Haven't seen anybody. Haven't done anything. But again,
Nice.
respecting the rules of the road, staying inside, staying safe. Joe, we have a Patreon page in the show. TooFast2Forever.com. Shout out to Cassie Wilson. I realized this yesterday. I have this memorized, but I still read it every time. Cassie Wilson, Jake Freer, Ben Milliman, Nick Burris, Alex Ellen, and Justin Kleinman. Brian Rodriguez of High School Summer Party, Haley Gerbies, Wes Hampton, Christian Larson, and Jerry Robinson for supporting us at the $5 level or above. Thank you all
everyone.
so very much. If you want to pick this lap, if you want to pick movies for the next 3 laps, TooFast2Forever.com. If you want a handwritten note and some stickers, just want to say hi, just want to support the show for $1 a month. Get access to the Fast and Furious Minute document and the access to the quiz, the early access to the quiz, TooFast2Forever.com. We also have an email address here on the show, family@cageclub.me. And Joe, we have 3 emails today.
Okay.
First up, from Nick Burris, subject line, this is a quote from Widows, "What is she wearing? A condom. LOL."
Yeah, that is a good. Didn't we say like Michelle Rodriguez improv that, right?
She did improv it, and you had the idea that she is a dressmaker, so she would know what is tacky and what is real, so
Yes.
yeah. Nick says, I wanted to mention some of my newer comedians, Chad Daniels, who I know, Cy Amundsen, who I've heard of, and Dan Cummins.
Dad Channels. This is one that Rachel and I were like listening to stand-up radio in the car, and Chad Daniels. Every time, because we would have like, what was it, like Spotify or Pandora comedy radio on while we were driving. Anytime we would get to a Chad Daniels one, we would just be like dying, like we'd be like laughing so hard, and to the point where we came home, we're like, we got to watch all of his stand-up. So I'm with you. I like Chad Daniels a lot.
I know him. I think he's been on. He's either been on podcasts that I listen to, or I've seen his stand up or heard his stand up. I couldn't tell you like anything like what kind of jokes or the whatever. I don't know anything about that, but I know the name for sure.
It's all just goofy stuff. It's fun. It cracks me up.
He says the getaway is pretty fun. Hobbs and Shaw make breakfast. While Shaw makes it, Hobbs cracks it. LOL. Says put my PS4 in my semi mostly to get ready for Crossroads, but also catching up on other games because my home time is for family. LOL.
Fair.
He says he's been getting into the Resident Evil games since he loves the movies.
Well, surprise, surprise. You might want to stick around for a little bit.
Since it's in the news, and I like how he says in the news, Sean's dad could still be a dumbass and a shitbag, as we called him when I was in the army. The people who would always be late. Plus, he was an officer, so I'd hardly ever see them. But they were in charge, so we would wait on them. But that's not all officers, he says. I can see how his dad could assume the mom, but really, the whole family has its quirks. Which, yes, that's our most recent thing. It's just like, oh yeah, no, they're all bad at the jobs, and by the jobs I mean just like living life.
They could all be wrong, right? Because none of the that's also an option, is that they all suck. So yes.
Yeah. He says about the deleted scenes. We're going to talk about more deleted scenes in this one. I think I saw the shirts off scene somewhere before. I take the Vince's mom scene as an alternate, so Vince does not show up with the group and comes later, which means we wouldn't get Coyotes R Us. I think they made the right choice. I think we probably could have gotten both, because I feel like we don't...
It would change the tone, though. Like we said, the tone is... I agree with Nick here. Like, the tone is so much more somber if he's coming from his mom. And, like, they wouldn't be making fun of him when he pulls up, you know? Like, it's disjointed. It feels weird.
He says, I'm calling you out, Joe, too. You were definitely against the infinity tattoo.
I believe that I was. But I was telling Rachel this story, because she doesn't listen, so I was recapping after we recorded that episode. I was like, yeah, but, like, now, if it was, like, the Too Fast logo, send it. I would be fine with it. I don't care. But I'm sure that at some point I was like, the infinity symbol is too much for me.
I just love that everybody listens at their own speed, and so you're going to keep getting shit about this for, like, next... Like, Wells will write in at some point, maybe, you know what I mean? I'm like, whenever people write in, it's just like, oh... We've had the conversation, but I still love that, like, oh, no, you're wrong. Like, this is one of the very, very, very few definitively, like, oh, no, you were wrong on the podcast.
I believe it. Yeah.
So I just love that people are like, oh, no, like...
And I'll get it for months. Yeah, we'll keep going. Back through it.
He says, Widows took me a while to get to watch, but I want to thank you for sort of making me watch it. I have seen some badass movies. Widows had a lot of little twists and good acting. Says, hopefully I get to watch Memento and Dark City soon. Catch you later, Nick.
Have you never seen Memento? Hopefully
maybe
you
not.
have.
Like, I feel like there's a lot of movies out there that, like, you just haven't seen that maybe you need, like, a reason to see it. Like, oh, I know that I would love, like, Lawrence of Arabia or whatever, right? But, like, I just haven't seen it. But, like, if a podcast I listen to did it, I might be like, oh, yeah, you know, now's the time.
It's also, like, I think it's your friend circle, too. Like, us in, like, Brigsby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we have, like, a huge following of people that watched it and love it. So, like, all of our friends have seen it. But that's not like everybody's seen it, right? So
no.
Maybe it's like one
that's
of those
why, like,
things.
I was trying to figure out when we were talking, because, like, the film club pick this past week has been Midsummer, and I was talking about Midsummer. You said all your friends were hype on that, and I was like, all your film, your horror friends, whatever. And I was like, well, what about The Lighthouse? Because to me, they're the same, like the same kind of thing, because it's like horror director who makes either The Witch or Hereditary, and then make their second movie, and, like, they both came out last year, and they're both, like, critically acclaimed, and still kind of under the radar. And you said, like, none of your friends really cared about The Lighthouse, which I find surprising, because it feels to me that if they love one, or if they're excited for one, should be excited for the other, but maybe not always.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you for writing in.
Yeah,
then we got one, which I did not know if you knew, but we talked about offline.
Ooh.
New $1 patron, meet, and I'm going to change the name, meet Maria 2, your sister Maria.
Yes.
Who has said to you she will never listen to the podcast.
Yes.
Supported us. Please tell the story of why, because I saw this come in, and I messaged her, I was like, what are you doing?
Her and Rachel and I were talking. Something came up, and we brought up you, because we were telling another story. She said, how is Joey and how is the podcast doing? And I was like, actually, you know, like, we get lots of emails from you guys, and I think it's doing really well. We do 2 a week and stuff like that. And she's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, what's the website, like the Patreon website for it? Because, like, I was explaining about Patreon and like all these things. So I sent her the link, and she said, okay, well, I'll support it, but if I ever make an OnlyFans, you have to subscribe to it. And I was like, I don't know if I could ever. That's just such a weird.
But you said you would pay her $1.
I'll send you $1 a month, but
via
I
Venmo,
can't.
But not subscribe on OnlyFans.
But I can't subscribe to your OnlyFans. Yeah, so she said she'll never listen, but she would just morally support us, and so she did, and I thank her for it.
If she has not made an OnlyFans yet in quarantine, I think we've passed it. I think that, like, if you were on the fence about that and you haven't yet, like, you're not going to.
I think it was more of a joke than any. Maybe she has, like, this killer fucking OnlyFans that, like, I don't know about. So who knows? I don't know. I won't find out because I'm never gonna go look for it. And if there is one, I'm not gonna subscribe to it.
I think you would have heard about it. Like, unless she's got this entire other persona online that just you don't know about somehow. But I feel like if she had one, you would know about it.
Also, she would be like fucking loaded.
Maybe it's not a successful one. Who knows?
I think that if she had a highly successful OnlyFans that she's hiding
Yeah.
from us, I would have been getting like weird ass gifts in the mail. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I bought you a new PlayStation. You'd be like, what? Like, I would have like, there'd be some dots there for me to connect, right? She's just hoarding it. She has all the money. She's still, like, she's living low, laying low, so nobody finds out.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Our last email from Wes Hampton, subject line Dark City, what up, fam?
What up, Wes? How are you doing, bud?
Dark City sounds pretty crazy and like my kind of movie. It's one of those movies that's been on our Netflix queue since way back in the day when we were still getting DVDs mailed to it, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Says, I wish I watched it first, but it's cool. I love going into a movie knowing nothing, so I'll avoid spoilers if possible, but spoilers also don't generally ruin movies for me, so I'm not fanatical about avoiding them.
You kind of know what we talk about in the movie, and like I guess we spoil things, but we don't really talk about the just the movie, right? So I don't even think that we could really like spoil the movie like Dark City.
I mean, we
for
spoil the
someone.
plot, but I don't know that it spoils the watching experience. So I think it
Yeah.
depends on what you would be upset about.
Also, like our focuses are on like Fast and the Furious things, so
Again, I've said it before, I will say it again. It is not a useful breakdown of the movie if you're looking for an actual breakdown of the movie. Like, aside from the actual main Fast and Furious movies, the conversations that we have are not good conversations for people like, oh, I want to hear somebody talk about Dark City. It's like, oh no,
Yes.
this is not for me.
I think we do a shitty job of breaking down the movie for somebody that cares only about that movie.
He says, anyway, I just have literally a couple of things. He uses it right because there's only two. A couple of things this time.
Okay.
Says you should look up Big Fat Quiz. This is what he wrote in last time about. He said it's a British quiz show they do every year around Christmas on Channel 4, I think.
Okay.
Pub trivia style game show with primarily British celebs hosted by Jimmy Carr. They've also done a bunch of specials, and I think they're all available on YouTube. And we watch pretty much all of them late at night while prepping stuff for the bakery. I highly recommend any year that has Noel Fielding, Richard Ayoade, or David Mitchell, especially if any of them are teammates. So
Okay.
Big Fat Quiz on YouTube.
I'll add it to my list of game shows that we watch when we get drunk. I'm down with that. We've been watching a lot of Supermarket Sweep because they put it on
Oh,
Netflix.
it's back on Netflix, yep. Mm-hmm.
I was telling Rachel that like when I was a kid, there was like certain shows that like when I would get sick from school, sick quote unquote, or just like ditch school, I would go to my grandparents' house because like I don't know what everybody else's situation was like if you missed school. My grandparents were like older and retired, so like they had like a lineup of during the day of what they would watch, right? And it would be like you would get Price is Right, and then you would get Let's Make a Deal when that came back with Wayne Brady, and like Supermarket Sweep was on at like early afternoon, but it was like reruns from whatever year that they were shooting it. And I was like, Rachel, this was like my favorite game show to watch. And so we had been watching it on YouTube, and then I saw that they added it to Netflix, and I was like, this is awesome because I was hoping that they bring it back.
It's not like every episode. They just did like a bunch of them, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not a comprehensive thing, right?
It's
Okay.
highlights. It's ones I think like spoilers, but like most of the ones they put on are like ones that the team wins. It wasn't a show that you like won. Kind of like Price is Right. Like you didn't like win every final showcase every time, right? Like
Right.
there was times that like people like didn't fucking win. So it was just like one of my favorite. It's just so wacky and like stupid.
Do you have a tactic? Do you have a strategy? Like, have you like mapped out what you would do at the end there?
Definitely get all the imported cheeses. You get all the meats first. What is it? The bug bombs. The bug bombs are worth a ton. Oh, but we also we reconvened this, and Rachel and I were talking about like what will you do now, and it's like saffron, right? Like that's crazy expensive. Like there's like a lot of items like that you would get, like balsamic vinegar, like imported balsamics. They can
Yep.
be really expensive. So like we've even thought about it. Like cheeses for sure still today is worth a ton. Oh, pistachios, right, are a ton. Like because you want like dense, you want expensive shit that's small. They always take like hams and stuff like that, but like hams are relatively cheap. This is the kind of things that I think about now. And we were like, yes, this is like we go through, and my
Gotcha.
strategy then
Okay.
and my strategy now would be a little bit different. Ultimately, that's my go-tos. Spices, like a lot of this, like saffron and stuff is like really fucking expensive. Vanilla bean, like I'm sure Wes knows, like it's like $20-$30 a jar right now.
Speaking of Wes, he goes on, I saw Dude, Where's My Car in theaters. I hated it. Well, that's next episode, not this episode. I was 15 and I wasn't really interested in it anyway, but I remember my brother, who was 10, wanted to see it, and my mom said she'd take us to the movies, but we had to see that. Figured going to a movie is better than not going to a movie, so she dropped us off. It was so dumb. Talked about how I don't like to be unnecessarily critical of things, or at least have something constructive to say, so I don't want to just trash this movie that other people, including my friends, enjoyed. Ironically, when you mentioned it, I started thinking about what other movies I really didn't like, and Harold and Kumar was the first one I thought of.
Yeah.
So it being the same director all tracks. He says that he and Mrs. West tried to watch it recently, and they didn't even finish it. It's the only time I can think of that I started a movie and didn't finish it. No regrets. That's it for this week. Can't wait to hear Nico and Kevo back again. Well, stay tuned.
Same.
To discuss what honestly should be the next Criterion release, Too Fast, Too Furious. Until next time, stay furious.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks for writing in, bud.
If you want to email in family@cageclub.me, send us a note. Just say hi. Send in your rankings. We haven't gotten rankings in a while, but I don't know if people are changing their rankings.
Did you like Harold and Kumar?
I don't think. I mean, I've only seen it once, and that was forever ago. I can't imagine that I would. I think I would like it more. I'm going to save my judgments for Dude, Where's My Car until the next episode. I didn't hate it.
Do you watch any of these stoner movies? Do you like?
I mean, I watch like the Judd Apatow movies and stuff like that. Like, I like a lot of those.
But that's Judd Apatow. It's like its own kind of. He's his own.
Oh, by the way, side note, I am currently reading a book called Antkind, Antkind, which is written by Charlie Kaufman, who wrote, like Adaptation and Being John Malkovich and Anomalisa, and it is like it's like a very, very fucking thick book, and I still don't really know what it's about. It's basically about a character who, he's just like this really, really, really pretentious, snobby film critic who sees this movie that is the movie is 3 months long.
Wait, what?
The movie in the book is 3 months long.
So how do you see that?
It's like the 3 months includes sleep breaks and food breaks and bathroom breaks and stuff like that. So there's a lot of times, but it's a 3-month process to see this movie. He's basically trying to remember the movie for the next hundreds of pages, and it's this wild book. But anyway, in the book, he's got all these takes on film critics. I think the book feels like a criticism of both media in general, but also a criticism of just criticism in general. He's making fun of so many things, but he's also making fun of basically showing how pompous and buffoonish a film critic can be. In the book, he's got all these hot takes, and on page 12 or whatever, he calls Christopher Nolan the Starbucks of filmmakers, that it's pretentious and overhyped and only stupid people like it or whatever. But Judd Apatow is the Dunkin' Donuts of filmmakers, because he's just throughout the entire book, he's propping Judd Apatow up on this pedestal and just saying he makes all the finest comedies, but he's always getting things wrong and making up I was a teenage stoner in the 80s, I love that movie. It's that's not a movie. It's just this wild thing where throughout, the funniest thing in the book, the book is really funny because Charlie Kaufman's really funny, but there's a thing where the guy, the film critic, who just goes by B because he wants to make sure that people don't know, he doesn't want his gender to influence how people read his reviews.
Okay.
And so he goes by B, and so he's explaining to the filmmaker of the 3-month-long movie the 7 ways in which he watches a movie. He doesn't feel like he's seen a movie until he watches it 7 ways. It's watch it once, and then watch it again with this in mind, watch it again with this in mind, watch it backwards, watch it upside down, watch it this. He's got 7 different ways, and it's literally 4 or 5 pages of a single paragraph of him just saying, this is how I watch it, this is what I get out of it. And then he stops and he looks up when he finishes, and the guy he's talking to is just making coffee and not even listening. And it's fuck this guy. He's just this pompous jackass. It's very funny. It feels and my friend Bob, who's on Tub Talk, who I've talked about on here before, he's reading it alongside me because he's, he and I are book buds, basically. He's I think every opinion that the guy has in the book is the opposite of Charlie Kaufman's opinion, because he keeps also bringing up Charlie Kaufman, but he keeps dunking on Charlie Kaufman. He was this pretentious Charlie Kaufman, this film that Synecdoche, New York, who do you think you are? Just making fun of him over and over and over again, just taking him down a peg every 30 pages. He just shits on himself, which is the weirdest thing to do. Chuck Palahniuk has brought himself up as a character in books, but it always just feels pretentious. This, when the first happened, I was oh boy. But it keeps happening, and it's very funny because it keeps happening. He keeps always shitting on he's basically his mortal enemy in this book. The film critic is Charlie Kaufman, which is a very weird thing to do, but also a very Charlie Kaufman thing to do.
This is awesome.
I just thought about Judd Apatow because he's there's nobody better, there's nobody finer as a filmmaker than Judd Apatow in this guy's mind, and so he's a different, you said, he's a different thing, but it's to this guy he's a wildly different thing. He is just the mastermind of Hollywood, making the only comedies. Comedy as an art form is overhyped, but Judd Apatow doesn't even make comedies. He just makes experiences.
Film. Yeah.
he's such a jackass, but like he keeps bringing up Charlie Kaufman to shit on him and Judd Apatow to like praise him, and it's just the wildest. I'm 400 pages into the book and I don't really know what it's like, where it's going or what it's about.
Awesome.
It's crazy. But
I just want you to tell me more stories about. I don't think I ever want to read the book. I just want to hear your stories of it because they're great.
Man, it is wild. But yeah, whew.
Oh, that was good. You gave me a good laugh there. Thanks. I'm glad we got to that. But
I mean, there's so many pages where I'm just like, I don't like, none of these words matter. I'm just like, I'm reading things where he's just like, he's saying things, and now he's like in a point where he's getting words wrong, and so like he'll type a wrong word, and then he'll be like, no, that's not the right word. He's like, or is it? And like he's like this whole like mental breakdown of like, was I using the right word? Did I even know what it meant? Like, does anybody know what it means? It's like, what are you doing?
It's like American Psycho, but with
But yeah, yes, basically, kind of, yes.
You're watching him like descend into madness, like live,
and like we just jump years later out of nowhere. It's just it's weird, yeah. But
it's
yeah,
cool. It sounds
kind
good, man.
if you want to read it. Anyway, family@cageclub.me if you want to email us. Joe, on the streets, any Fast and Furious news that you have seen? I have not seen any. Have you seen any since we last recorded?
Jason sent us some from like Screen Rant and stuff like that. They were like, like what was Dom up to and stuff.
Oh, I saw that. It's that article is it's Los Bandoleros. It's like, hey, there's this other thing, which it's not news.
I know. They're just making a lot of Fast and Furious clickbait articles, and it's sad and annoying.
I mean, it works.
Yeah, I guess.
Anything else you've seen? Because I don't know that there has been anything. Because I saw that. Because that was one where I was like, this actually could be interesting. If they were like bringing in, not fanfic, but like stuff that like metafiction or something, right? Yeah. But like, no, it's just, Los Bandoleros fills in the gaps. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, there's not more than one thing. It's just Los Bandoleros. It's like, oh, yeah. Anything else? Or just Screen Rant stuff?
That's it.
There's like another Screen Rant thing that I don't even remember the title of because I'm like, I'm not going to click on it. Like, I just don't. Like, I feel like they've become the enemy on this podcast. And like, they're just, I don't think they're any better or worse than like many other sites that are out there, but it's like, they just do more, I think, and we see it more, and so like it's just more prevalent.
It's a lot of content, is what it is. And now that we we watch like one niche of it, like I'm sure that it's like 6 different writers generating content, and just like we only see the best.
It might just be like an AI. Like there's like AI that like just deep fake text now. Like it could just be like
some poor kid in Indonesia that is getting paid 25 cents an article to write Fast and the Furious articles for them.
Just like the Indonesian Kate Hudson, just like cranking out fanfic about Twilight, but just about boy.
Exactly.
So the final thing to do, we are not doing an episode of Lost, and we are not doing a Fast and Furious Minute, because this is in the Missing Pieces lap. We are doing the deleted scenes from Too Fast, Too Furious. There are only 6 of them. We could not find more on YouTube. I feel like they're a little bit less exciting overall than the first movie, but there's a couple in here that are pretty cool, pretty good.
I agree. On the DVD, or like we'll post the link on YouTube, the link to YouTube that seems like somebody ripped it off their DVD. John Singleton sitting down with the editor,
Bruce Cannon. Yep.
Bruce Cannon of the film, and they also kind of like they bring up the scenes that were cut,
or what they call lifted.
Lifted, that's right. Lifted is the word that they use, and kind of why, and you'll see why when we talk about them.
So it was a little lackluster in that regard, because I was hoping for like the first one was like a solid 6.5 minutes of just scenes, and then there was the optional director's commentary where Rob Cohen talked over it. This was 6 minutes, but like it included probably like 90 seconds of them introing each clip, and so like it kind of felt like we were like losing a little bit of steam each time, because we're like, okay, let's go to the tape, basically. Just like, well, okay. So I think the presentation of like that has nothing to do with the quality or the caliber of the scenes, but I think that like just the way that the first one was done, like, and it wasn't on YouTube, like you couldn't see the first ones, like the director's commentary this way, but like I just felt like the way, like you couldn't even on this DVD break down scene by scene. It was just like here's the one thing you click on, and that's it. Cool that it existed, but a little bit lackluster. I mean, I'm guessing for more than one reason that the first movie is going to be the high watermark for this.
Yeah, same.
The fact that we got all that, like, I love it. So anyway, first scene was one that was completely lifted from the movie. It's Brian and Tanner on the rooftop of the customs building. It feels like a lot of these revolve around the physical location of the customs building. Like, a location that's like not really involved or included too much in the movie.
Not at all.
There's a lot here, a lot about basically, again, we're going to talk in the back half of this about like how I want to know more about Bilkins. Like we don't get any of that, but this is kind of bridging the gap in a way that like the prelude does, sort of. It's after Brian has been captured by customs officers and he's just talking to Bilkins and he knows because there's Monica Fuentes at the race, like he knew that she
Brian
stood
does.
out. Yes.
Yeah.
But he knows that Bilkins is probably, he wants him for something because they didn't arrest him. They're basically
That's what he
talking about
says, yeah.
like, why didn't you arrest me?
Well, he asked Brian, why did you let Dom go? Tell me
Says
why
you wouldn't
let him-"
understand.
Yeah.
And then that's when he says, it's pretty common, a little bit of Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
And then he talks about Monica Fuentes. So he kind of knows, doesn't really explain why they didn't arrest Brian, but now that I guess they know where Brian is, they're not arresting him now because they need him to drive, right? And so it's like a cool kind of bridging the gap.
He's talking about why isn't he in handcuffs right now? Because they caught him, and he's relating back. Bilkins is saying like, well, why did you let Dom go? And that was the thing that was frustrating to me. Is like we don't even get an answer to that, and for that reason, I'm like, okay, I'm glad the scene got cut. I was really hoping Brian was like, you won't understand, and then like goes into like some small monologue about it, but that's just fan service of what I want.
And this is probably the longest of the scenes that are deleted, and I feel like some of it is interesting and some of it is just like, like it's like the way that you would have filled in the gaps anyway, right? Like even taking aside like what you say that we wish that we had seen, I think what we actually see here, it's like, like we know that like Bilkins would have understood. Like it's just like we don't need people to explain like why Brian let Dom go. It's like, because they formed a bond. Right? Like,
and Brian would have figured out that they wanted him to drive, and that's why he's not arrested when we see the Gallo 24, Gallo 12 conversation, right? Like they show it in the next scene.
It more explicitly and directly ties Monica Fuentes with Bilkins, who like we never see the two of them together, but like we understand that as the movie goes on too. So it's kind of like, I get why this was lifted. And again, like it's funny to me to think like these guys having these explanations, like valid explanations, like why they cut out these scenes, and then we jump a few movies later and they're like 30, 35, 40 minutes longer, and it's like, well, what are you doing with these? You know what I mean? Like they're so intentionally getting it under like without credits, like under 100 minutes or whatever, right? And then like, later we're like, cool, 2.5 hour movie, like sign me up.
Fuck it.
Anything else about this one? I mean, it ends with a cool line, I want you to drive, but like, does he want him to drive? I mean, kind of, but not. Like, it's more like just get undercover. Like it's a kind of a movie cliche in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else about the scene or no?
No, other than I was wishing that he would have answered the question of why'd you let Dom go and not just cop outs with super vague, you wouldn't understand.
Scene 2 is Roman's intro. They say this was cut to lose time and make Roman more mysterious later. And the craziest thing of all, if you want to watch these scenes, they're going to be on the same YouTube playlist because we'll just add to the same thing on Too Fast, Too Forever, youtube.com/Too Fast, Too Forever. Go check them out. They're less important, I think, to see than the first ones, but like, the craziest thing about this one is this is him in the Demolition Derby.
Yes.
And when I realized that this was mid-competition, I was like, holy shit. Like, it seems like this is the victory thing where he, like, kicks out and, like, he's just doing his thing. He's still one-on-one. I'm like, why are you doing this in the middle of everything? Like, that's crazy.
But it's also a very Roman thing to do. I'm glad that we got this extra scene of Roman, but it was just Roman being Roman. And I get why it was cut out, because it's much more enjoyable to see Brian and Bilkins talking about Roman and just watching him from afar than seeing him put on a performance. But it was also funny to see like how Roman he was acting. Like, what is this? This is my house or whatever. Whose house is this?
So he kicks his windshield out. His windshield is shattered. As he kicks the windshield out, then he somersaults through where the windshield was, ties like a belt or a strap or something, like maybe
to keep his hood down.
And then he stands on his hood. And he says, "Whose house is this? What? Whose house?" And I was like, oh, it feels like a victory speech. Like, it feels like I just won, this is the final guy, whatever, I'm champion here. But then, no, he gets back into his car, and then he lines up, basically, the chicken game between, like, Dom and Shaw later, and he just says, last man standing, and then he flips this guy, and then he says, now what? It's my house.
The one cool thing I did like about this, though, is that we see that Roman has fans, and I thought that was something we kind of miss in the movie, right? Because, like, they seem like they're responding to him, and that he might have, like, a following in the Demolition Derby circuit, as opposed to people just watching the whole thing explode, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But other than that, I see why they cut it. This one makes sense.
Yeah, there's nothing, I mean, it's cool, like it's more of the characterization thing that we liked about some of the scenes from the first movie, but again, overall, it's whatever. Then scene 3 is Brian and Roman arriving at the customs building, and this is introducing Markham, who is James Remar, and this is when he's kind of just like dunking on Roman. He says, Roman Pierce, huh? Cut off sleeves, tattoos. We got all this trouble getting him a job a real man should be doing. And where's that dog collar I heard all about, which I guess is his ankle monitor, maybe? Or is he saying something else?
Yeah, no, he's saying his ankle monitor, because we see Brian talk about it earlier, right? Like, Brian and Bilkins see it.
And then what I liked about this was that Brian is, like, smiling while his friend gets ribbing from his boss, basically, and then he just says, don't smile at me, O'Connor. And I was like, all right, cool. I like that.
I like that part of it, but I didn't like that how do we have Roman run his mouth to everyone else, but
And
like
just
just
eat
take?
shit here? Yeah, I don't know.
Yes, that's why I was like, it's not a very As much as I liked the standing on the car, whose house is this? Him coming from that, and he also like steals from Carter Verone, and he talks shit to the cops later. It's like, why would he just sit here and just like take this one and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like he
Hmm.
should have mouthed off a little bit. So I'm glad that they cut this one for that reason. It would have felt out of character to me.
The next scene is the kind of the last longer scene that we have, and I think that this is interesting. Like this kind of feels like a direct precursor to the rat scene, like not direct
Yes.
precursors in terms of where it happens in the film, but like why the guy Detective Wentworth gets the rat put on him at the club, because this is a scene between Carter Verone and the rat guy. Actually, with that in mind, it feels like a lot of these, like I think that there are, maybe it's just because we know this movie less than the first one because we haven't done the minute, but I feel like I have a less of a firm grasp on where these scenes would actually be placed.
That's
Like I
fair.
know generally, but I feel
Yeah.
like in the first one we're like, okay, we know explicitly like where we would cut this in. Right here, it's just like, well, I'm not really, I'm not sure.
It could go in a lot of different places. And I think just because of how open ended it is, it has to come. I don't think it's directly before the rat scene. I think it's some point before the rat. Like, it has to be before that, but I don't know when.
So in here, this is Carter Verone and the rat guy. I called him Detective Wentworth, just talking outside, and he's basically saying the Wentworth's like, I'm out. You know, internal affairs is up my, and then he says butt instead of ass, up my butt,
Which
which
is
I was like,
weird.
I can't do it, can't do it. And then he says, then we're through, and he tells a guy, escort this guy out of here. So like it just feels like you failed me. I'm gonna replace you with somebody else, right? So like it just
Yeah.
it's all right, but again, like in the movie, the rat scene kind of it's like, well, who is this guy? What did he do? You can kind of infer here. I mean, you
Yes.
still don't know exactly what. It's just more like, oh, he's doing something or he's not doing something, right? So it's not exactly explicit, but it feels a little bit better. But like kind of whatever.
We don't need it because he doesn't become a character later, right? So, like, you don't need to, like, introduce him because all we see is with the rat thing, and that's good enough for me. So, I'm glad that this one was cut too.
The one interesting thing about this is that we kind of get a little bit of Monica Fuentes' POV. Like we follow her in the house and we
It
see
is.
from her perspective, which doesn't happen otherwise. And like it's a weird choice, I think, but like it's just more like she's spying on, like she's still. This might be even like what we talk about later. This shows that she's still a cop, or maybe she's just curious, but it feels like she's still trying to like figure out what's going on. She's not like so deep undercover that she doesn't like she's just in with Carter. Like she's like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to know what's happening here.
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe this scene removes some of the ambiguity that we see later where we don't know which side she's on.
Yeah.
Because if she's doing her, like, cop job here, it's like, oh, well, we know she's still doing cop things, so.
Because I think you could explain it away like she is just being nosy, but I feel like this is more like I think
No.
of the two, it's more cop than just nosy.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the next scene again, we have Monica and Carter, and this is just a very short thing where she smokes a cigar. It's like okay,
Yeah, like, instead of him just smoking the cigar, he hands it to her, she takes a puff and goes, oh, it's pretty good, and hands it back to him.
he
Like,
says not bad, huh? It's like yeah, we assume that you're not smoking shitty cigars. Like what are you doing?
no,
Man?
I think that was meant to establish that they're
Like
in
romantic?
a relationship. Yes. Because they were sharing something that involves both of their mouths being put on it.
I guess 6 feet away now. Don't share cigars in the era of COVID, please.
No,
Thank you.
definitely don't.
And then the final scene, again, this is who gives a shit. It's Brian and Roman kicking Enrique. They're basically pulling a Hobbs and Shaw where they're like, we need to work together. And then one of them, I think Brian spits on him, which might even
No,
happen in the
Roman
movie,
does.
but I was just like, oh, yeah, okay.
That was the one that, as we were watching these, Rachel goes, "Yep, I know why that was cut." Just completely unnecessary. It's like an extra like 30 seconds of them kicking him, and you're like, yeah, at that point, like this movie just becomes like violent, right? Like it's not like you don't need a minute and a half of them kicking him on the ground. You need like 2 kicks, and then we move on with the movie. That's not the point of it. So
Yeah, like either infer the violence or just like hint at it, but here it's just, yeah, like they just beat the, like they basically leave him in, like to die. Like they leave him in a
Yeah.
coma basically to die. It's just like, oh, like I think that this, it's like, okay, instead of just like getting revenge, it's like, oh no, they're malicious. Like they're kind of bad guys here. It's like, well, we don't need that.
yeah, exactly.
Overall thoughts though on the, I think we agree, like we talked about these way less. I think there's way less to digest, and maybe just because like we talk about in the back half of this episode, there's less plot in this movie than the first one. Like I think character development and plot wise there's a lot more going on in the first, but like
Yes.
overall thoughts on these 6 scenes.
The main takeaway I have of this is because of
Yeah.
how it's set up, and John Singleton's like kind of previewing the clips to you, right? He's introducing them. The thing that really made me laugh is that he referred to all of them by their character names only. Did you notice that? He's like,
I did
yeah,
not.
and then like he's like Mr. Pierce and like Detective whatever and like Bilkins. Like he's calling them all only by their character names, and it's like it was such a weird thing for me to hear because like you think like as a director he'd be like, yeah, then Paul Walker did this and Tyrese did this. But he's like, no,
nope,
Roman and Brian.
Brian and Roman, yep. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like,
weird.
That's so strange. It gave me comfort in the fact that we call them all by their character names all the time, too. So
I mean, I think for anybody listening to the podcast, worth seeing, go to the YouTube channel, check it out on there, on the same playlist, the Deleted Scenes playlist, but like...
It's quick, it's 6 minutes.
If you only have 6 minutes of your time, watch the first movie, not the second movie, but like, you know, if you're listening to our nonsense 4 or 5 hours a week, like, you can watch both.
Yeah, it's cool to see. Like, they were cool to see, but this was a lot less exciting than the first ones, for sure.
All right, Joe, let's take a break. Let us bring in Nico and Kevo, and let's talk about Too Fast, Too Furious.
Welcome back to Too Fast, Too Forever. This is episode number 114, Too Fast, Too Furious. This episode is brought to you by Dr. Formulated Memory and Focus for Adults 40+. This formula features organic neurofactor, a whole coffee fruit extract clinically shown to promote BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor production in healthy adults. Shout out, Dr. Formulated Brain Health, Memory and Focus.
Well, shout out indeed to the longest sponsor we have ever had in the history of Too Fast, Too Forever, and welcome back to Too Fast, Too Furious Lap 7. Joining us, as always this lap, every single main installment in this franchise, we have with us today Nico, Vasilo, and Kevo Risse. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, boys. Hello.
Welcome.
Hello, Clarice. Oh, Carlise. I should have said hello, Carly. I can't say it. Never mind.
You guys have huge fans. I mean, I know we've been saying this to you, but like that first episode, whew, we've been getting tons of feedback about.
People love it. People love it. People love you on these shows.
For sure.
It happens everywhere we go.
That's what I figured. I hoped as much, and I knew as much. So we are ecstatic that you have not been scared away by this movie, or by this franchise. So, I mean, we did have the incredible Turbo Charged Prelude we will talk about, but first, we have a couple more either-or questions for you. We have 2 questions here. One about the movie, one not about the movie. Are you ready for some hard-hitting questions?
Cut.
What?
Oh, that wasn't the question? It wasn't cut or Okay, sorry. You said hard-hitting question. I was making a joke. I want to go die in a corner. Goodbye. It was a penis thing.
I should have known it's always a penis thing, but I didn't. But okay, here we go. I even know the story.
We're talking about cars.
I even know the story.
We're talking about cars.
Nico has told me the story, but okay.
I've told you the story.
Yeah. We'll start Kevo first. Kevo, are you more of a Tej or a Roman? Now that you know both Tej and Roman, not know where they grow, how they develop, but so far, through the one movie you know them, would you say you're more of a Tej or a Roman, Kevo?
Like me personally, or more of a fan?
You personally.
You personally.
Who better describes, who better resembles or embodies your personality, Tej or Roman?
Probably Roman, but I like Tej as an addition to this ensemble better.
Okay.
Good to know. We will get way deeper into that later. And I almost don't think I need to ask Nico which of these two, although maybe I do. Nico, who are you more of, a Roman or a Tej?
I'm more of a Tej.
Really?
But
Wow.
I probably prefer Roman.
Interesting. I was going to say the center of the party, the life of the party, the motor mouth, the everybody's favorite.
Hold on. I want to say, because like I'm going to sit here and I'm going to imagine sitting on a bus singing Sweet Lady with my headphones on. Because, man, I love Tyrese, but he's such a dick. Like, He's just such a dick. Like, I mean, and I loved him, but he's got to be the life of the party, and if he's not, he's angry. And I am never angry if I'm not the life of the party, and I'll tell you why, because I've never found a party that I wasn't the life of.
Perfect. I will say that Roman evolves in a way that I am fascinated to see you guys, whether you like it or not, because he's a very, very, like, of all the characters grow, but of all the characters, he, I think, is the most different between this and our most recent installment. Like, he changes dramatically, and also, in some ways, stays exactly the same. So I'm very fascinated to hear what your take is on him as the movies go on. But now, enough of that silly question. A much more important question. Do the both of you prefer In-N-Out or Whataburger?
I have no stake in this matter. I have no... I prefer Dorothy's Bornak. Is that...
Oh.
Yeah, I don't think either of us have any frame of reference for this question.
Totally
I've
fair.
never had either. Have you ever had either?
And I mean, I don't really fast food either. So like...
Wait, what's Dorothy's whatever you said?
That's
No,
Okay.
that's
Girls.
just a character from Golden Girls.
I
That's
was-
just
Yeah.
Nico being Nico.
I'm like, yeah, if you're giving me a choice of things I don't know, I'm just going to say something I like instead. So... Can I get like
Chipotle. I prefer
Chipotle?
Chipotle.
Can we Chipotle? Is that on the table? Is that
miss
I'll write it down.
Chipotle.
I mean,
I miss Chipotle so much. Like, all I want to do is, like, go be at a mall. And, like, I don't like the mall, okay? I was one of those people that was like, the malls are dying. Good.
isn't one of your BFFs, past guest of the show, your former co-host, Chris Podcast, he was a mall kid, right? Were you not a mall kid with him, or no?
Oh, I was, okay, so...
Why do you think he hates malls now?
fair.
Like, so, okay, and this is really important to contextualize. Growing up in, like, 3rd grade, I have this really clear memory of, like, sitting kind of, like, by myself in the library reading books. There was, the elementary school library, and the elementary school librarian came over to me, and she was like, oh, young man, why are you by yourself? And I was like, because there's people over there. And she was like... oh, do you not have friends? And I was like, no, my friends are right there. And she was like, so why are you over here? And I was like, because, woman, I just need some time alone, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
I've always been like that. When I got to high school and teachers would give me the time of day in a social setting, I was all about that shit. That was my lifeblood, right? Like, adults to talk to. Even as a kid, one of the things, like, I mean, to bring up Chris, one of the things I got along with the best with Chris is that he's also an ornery person hater. I wasn't a person hater. I was
Yeah.
like a kid hater. He and I shared hating all of our peers, which is kind of why things are a little bit different now. He still hates all of our peers, and I'm slightly more positive on them.
Try at least.
Until they try my patience, yes.
Good explanation. I like that. I also want to point out, I remember I was talking to a teacher in high school while I was walking in class, like one of my teachers was nearby, and like we just started chatting about something. The teacher walked away, or I walked away, or like they got stopped by someone or whatever, and like a friend came up to me like, why were you talking to a teacher? Why were you talking to a teacher? I was like, why wouldn't I be? Like they're more interesting than like you. Like I don't understand like the stigma, anti-teacher stigma. Like I agree. Like not necessarily my lifeblood, but like people who understand that like teachers are far more interesting than like the dumb kids you're friends with. Are like that's the cool people.
Like, I want to ask you a very serious question. Now, I'm going to try and, like, put it in terms people get. I'm giving you a free car. I am giving you either this toy Hot Wheels that is all real dinged up and worth nothing, or you can have a Ferrari. Okay? High schooler brains are Hot Wheels. Compared to a high schooler brain, any fucking teacher is a Ferrari. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the day you graduate from Emanuela in space to, like, Brazzers. There's this leap in
my God.
the connective tissue that binds it all together.
I can't believe that I'm going to tell this browser story for the second time this episode. But I was driving the other day, and I was visiting a friend, and I'm driving down the highway, and I see coming up on my left a car with like these very like holographic kind of lights. I see this car, and now that I'm playing the game, like now that I'm doing the podcast, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Let me see what the car is. Like, if it's a cool car, maybe I'll describe it to Joe. And it drives by, it's a Ford GT, and I'm just like, oh, just, generic muscle car or whatever. And then I look at the license plate. The license plate's like a regular New Jersey plate. The license plate holder, like the cheap piece of plastic around it, is a Brazzers license plate. And I'm like, who the fuck would brag about being a fan? Or I guess maybe like Joe and I, like the best thing we can possibly imagine is like you're like a producer or like a employee of Brazzers who like, hey, this is the car that my porn money bought. Here's my Brazzers license plate.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, I love Brazzers. But like, not even the license, like the license plate wasn't Brazzers. It was the cheap piece of plastic around it that said Brazzers. And I can't believe that like in the 113 or 14 or whatever episodes of the show, it's mind blowing to me.
Like the fact that merchandise exists in the
Yes!
first place, and
Yeah!
then you buy it, and you're gonna have questions, and like not to make any general statements whatsoever, but I personally, as a gay man, would better understand a men.com vanity plate because, like, in gay culture, you're more likely to find a partner who is also into that culture. If that's a Brazzers license plate thing, it's probably a straight dude. Not that there isn't any queer or bi porn ever, but it's probably a straight guy. Are you married? Are you looking for love? Does your partner not know what this means? Or do they know?
If you're presumably, again, I don't want to assign too much meaning to this license plate holder, but if you're probably a straight guy with this, like, do you think that women are going to be into the fact that you're publicly promoting Brazzers.com? Unless you're only explicitly looking for the women who would be into a guy who loves Brazzers.
That has to
in
be
which
it.
case, by all means, go for it.
I, one time, almost considered giving my money to we'll call it a worn pite. I decided not to give my money to said worn pite. One of the things was if you signed up for 3 months, they would send you this towel, and let's say that they expect you to use this as a rum kag, right? And I said to myself, can you imagine being the guy who's like, oh, now that we've finished making brownies, do you need this rum kag? And can you imagine the person being like, your rum kag is of a worn pite? And I'd have to be like, I know. What does that say about you, though? Like,
but again, gay culture, if somebody had a rum tag, was it?
a rum kag.
A rum kag from a worn pite, I would be like, this is so fucking cute. Where did you get this?
Well, one time we were having a pretty fun weekend with a friend and his husband, and one of them had a t-shirt of a specific worn pite, and I had to be like, where did you get it? Did you do anything for the site? And they were like, no, but I made the t-shirt to prove a point. And I was like, that's fascinating. And then over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, I've come across a number of people with this t-shirt or a similar t-shirt. And I'm always like, where did you get your Sean Cody shirt? And they're always like, I made it. And I'm always like, the number of homosexual adult men I know that have screen printed their own fake bootleg gay porn website t-shirt to make it seem like they jizzed a load on this one couch.
But that introduces a new factor. Did this man buy the Brazzers vanity plate, or did he make it? Which is then an even extra level of dedication to having this thing on his car.
Did he 3D print it? Is he an engineer with very little time and a CAD license?
These are all fascinating possibilities that I need to find this Ford GT. So if you're out there, Mr. Ford GT, because we know you're a Mr. If this is a woman driving this, like, I have so many more
other questions.
or way fewer. It's one way or the other.
No. Let's just say what it is. Letty, if that's you, we just want to take you out for drinks and listen to you tell us about your favorite better times.
Yeah. I also realized that I did the math wrong, and so we would have talked about Brazzers 2 episodes ago as opposed to today. But, now we're just they're stacking up the Brazzers content. Who knows? I mean, you never know. I've never paid for Brazzers. I'm familiar with their logo.
I hope they send you a license plate cover now.
Please, sponsor.
Yes, that's our next sponsorship.
Joe, next time you need a sponsor, sponsored by Brazzers.com. People are going to be like, what?
You're going to get, like, a box with just a rum kag in it.
Brazzers Auto Accessories. Man, that's the new sponsor.
Like a steering wheel cover.
It looks like 2 dicks. So you're
Okay, so, thank you for that. So now, before we talk about Too Fast, let us first talk about the Turbo Charged Prelude to Too Fast, Too Furious, a 6-minute, mostly wordless, devoid of all things cinematic interlude between the first and the second movie. And to your point, like, last episode that you guys were on, we asked, how do you think they get from California to Miami? And you said they drive there, right. And we see them drive. We see Brian drive from California to Miami. So congratulations on your victory. What else do you have to say about this 6-minute short?
What do you know of why was this created, and then why was it withheld from the film?
Wait, no, I believe, if I am not mistaken, it was created to bridge the content of the first and second film for a special edition DVD. Okay. There is then additionally a cut-down version of it at about 2.5 minutes included on the second movie's initial DVD release.
So yes, so the story behind this is that like a week or 10 days before Too Fast came out in theaters, they reissued the first movie on DVD, and they added like I think probably like a movie ticket in there, like to be like, hey, go see the new movie, and they put this on there so you could understand how they're getting from one to the second. They had, I think, 2 versions of the script for Too Fast, one with Vin Diesel, one without Vin Diesel, because they didn't know if he was going to come back or not. And they offered him like a fuck ton of money, and he said, no, I'm going to go make, I think, Triple X or maybe a Pitch Black or like a Riddick movie. One of those, he's just like, I'm going to go do this other thing. And he was basically like, I'm walking away from the franchise. So then they had to like figure out the other story, which is then, Brian going back with his friend from childhood or whatever. So like, I think it was less clear that this was a sequel because one of the 2 main stars was not in it, so they reissued the DVD, get excitement up, boost DVD sales again, and also be like, hey, this guy from the first movie, here's where he winds up.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't expect the way he got from movie 1 to movie 2 was essentially a Duke Nukem cutscene.
Yeah.
It did have all the finesse of a Limp Bizkit music video.
Oh.
Yeah.
The most important thing I think in this transition video is that we have Minka Kelly from Friday Night Lights and from many other things, from Derek Jeter's storied history with celebrities.
Oh, great. Now I can bring up Mariah Carey. So Mariah Carey dated Derek Jeter in the late 90s.
Wait, was that really Minka Kelly in The Little Short?
Yeah, that was her. She played
Yes.
the iconic role of Girl, as you might remember, just credited as Girl.
I am not at all surprised that she was simply Girl.
There's not a ton to talk about with this short. It's just the transition. I want to give you guys the complete scope, the complete picture of the Fastiverse. But is there anything else you want to talk about before we dive into Too Fast?
Honestly, this was one of those things where frequently when it comes to the comic universe, there's a lead up to the crossover that's really just the lead up crossover to the real crossover. This happens way too frequently. I wind up buying way too many miniseries, and I've managed to break the cycle of pain. If I'd had to separately issue my own money for this, like if I'd had to be like, here are my dollars, I wish to see this unique film, I would be pretty annoyed.
Right.
Just the prelude or the movie?
The prelude.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
learning that it's something that was created for fun after the fact to get people excited, because so many scenes that people decide to create for these things, they're like, oh, and it's really necessary. This is not necessary, but it's
No.
fun.
What I will say is that before a couple laps ago, Joe and I had never seen this, and so we watched this and we were equally both like, wait, this is like, when we watched on YouTube, it's like, is this the actual audio? Because you're like, this can't be the actual audio.
We're
But
like,
it is.
we thought the audio got taken down, and they
Right.
put like a score over it. But no,
nope,
nobody
This
talks.
is the audio.
Yeah.
But I will say that, so the next episode you guys join us for, we're skipping Tokyo Drift because we're going chronologically. But before we get to Fast and Furious number 4, we're going to watch Los Bandoleros, which I talked about. But like that's directed by Vin Diesel. And like I cannot express to you the leap in quality from like this to that. Like that
It's a
is
short film.
genuinely
It's a real short
great
film.
thing to watch. This is just like, what's even the point?
My dad, in his own little way, is an amateur film critic in that way that all, middle-aged men are. When my dad saw Harriet the Spy with me for my birthday when I was 10 or whatever, all he would keep shouting is, that was terrible. That was like an MTV music video for like an hour and 45 minutes. I swear to God, I could not believe this was only 6 minutes. And yet at the same time, it felt like 1 minute. There was nothing to it. I kind of just,
Nope.
This was a period in time where, and we've talked about it a little bit on the first show that I was lucky enough to be on this network, Now and Again. We talked about it a bit there, where when Now and Again started, we were just exiting the break the sound barrier sort of phase where, the special edition of a record was 21 tracks. And the reason the special edition of a record was 21 tracks was in part to stop piracy. If you couldn't fit everything on the one version, you sacrificed something in your piracy. As much as I love her, Tori Amos is kind of the queen of needed to learn to self-edit. Okay, now there's Tori. I think a lot of artists, I can't stop thinking of tracks that I would have cut from a lot of those special editions that hit 23 and 24 songs. This is so symptomatic of the era of media it's from, in this sense of, volume creates legacy.
Yes, number one. We also just saw, quite literally like this month, Taylor Swift just put out her new album with 16 unique physical versions with like 16 different iterations of the bonus song or something, right? So like it still exists. It's still there. It's crazy.
It is bonkers banana pants.
Anyway, that is enough about the Turbo Charged Prelude. Let us get into the meat of the episode. Too Fast, Too Furious. Before we go any further, let's kick things off with a discussion question. Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, not in this movie. But if you guys had to pick who is the most Letty character in this movie, or if you don't have a character that quite fits, is there a moment in here that you're like, oh, I can see Michelle Rodriguez, I can see Letty doing that?
I think that there were some pretty clear stand-ins in this movie for other people. If you had told me that this was based on a script called Let's Vilify All the Brown People, I would have believed you more than I would believe that this was actually conceptualized as a sequel to Fast and the Furious. I think that this script that they took that kind of does feel like they've superimposed the Fast and the Furious vibe onto. I feel like, well, I know he's probably meant to play Ja Rule's role. Tej kind of smacks of the facilitator. While he's clearly used as kind of like an anything man, he's kind of like an ignition factor. He's the guy you can go to get things going. And while I know that's not exactly the role Letty played, it is kind of fundamentally the role she plays by being the person who can finesse whatever Dom needs finessed. Suki, in many ways, did kind of capture the energy of Amiya in terms of being the heart of the race. But at the same time, she played kind of an actively passive role in this film. And that was something that I think meant that there were no women in this film that had agency. None. Despite one of them being an agent. And that is something that Letty very much had. Letty was deeply coded male, and the only thing that kept her firmly ensconced in that notion of femininity is the fact that her gender was frequently used as a weapon against her in terms of expectation of her ability. So it's really hard to say that somebody is a Letty, as Letty was a coded male character whose unique independence freed her from the confines of male-female dynamics and agency in action films. So it's tough. So I guess the closest would be Tej in this sort of extended metaphor kind of way.
I love that.
That's awesome. I would never thought that, only because like we have such history with Tej, so I couldn't.
Yep. And Kevo, what about you? Do you agree with the Tej maybe as the most Letty, or is there someone else that you see as Letty, as more Letty? Lettier.
I probably agree. I think it's easy to sort of lean into the idea of Eva Mendes's character being the Letty simply because she is one of the only women to have more than 10 lines in the entire movie. But I don't know that it's a clean comparison.
That's fair. Joey and I were talking about it today, and we were like, okay, between Suki and Monica Fuentes, which one is more Letty?
And not just because of the gender, but because of the actual kind of the role, the purpose that they serve in the movie,
yes.
The role, the interactions they have specifically, I think, with Brian.
We see that Monica and Brian kind of have like a flirtatious relationship, which...
No, they don't.
They do, but
No, that's a gay dude and his female friend out at the Cheesecake Factory getting mojitos.
Wait, are you saying Carter Verone, or are you saying Brian?
Oh, Brian, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I got really excited. I'm so sorry.
No,
You're
it's
right.
okay.
I'm
We'll
sorry.
get into
I
Carter
just can't
Verone.
wait. I just can't wait to get to where Brian is clearly intimate with Roman. Down to where they scissor at one point early in the film. But I did think that this seriously did come to mind. I actually did think that there was a heavy implication that perhaps Verone and Fuentes had been intimate physically.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those situations where she had to get so deep undercover. She's actually a phenomenal foil for Brian, whereas Brian loves the thrill of the rush so much that he's willing to compromise. Hurry, hurry, lover, come to me. Where he's willing to compromise who he is as a person. She's not. She's literally willing to go down with the ship.
Which I really appreciated, especially when it was suggested early on that she had flipped, and that is such a common trope to do. I really appreciated that she didn't, and in the end was just that deep undercover.
But yeah, they're definitely saying that, like, she is Carter Verone's girlfriend. Like,
well, they think that she's so deep under that she might have flipped entirely, right? That she's become so entrenched in what she's doing. But I think in the end, obviously, she rats him out to the cops that are being held by Brian, and they only wind up at the airstrip, right? Because she's the only one who knew. Like, it's like a very classic movie trope, but like for a long time you're like, oh, she might just be in it.
Yeah. She might be like taking them for a ride. Yep.
I think it's questionable, but I also would question if the gender roles were flipped and it was a male undercover officer who was regularly sleeping with this female criminal, we would probably just say it's part of his cover, and we wouldn't really question it. Even if she's sleeping with Carter, I don't necessarily think that means she flipped. I do question what she ultimately would have decided to do if Brian hadn't shown up and been so pretty. At least that's what the film wants us to posit. I don't think even if she was sleeping with him, that necessarily means that she was considering turning, but I do think that it's important to the narrative that it's a question. It should be a question, whatever her gender is, because that's the stakes of a film like this.
I wish in this regard that the movie cared at all about this, but like I think it just kind of throws it away. It's just like, oh yeah, like she's so deep undercover we don't know, but like it doesn't have the interest. Like I think we're led to believe that there's been like this course, this history that she's been under for so long that they're not sure. Maybe she's like missing check-ins
11 months. You slipped up once. Yeah, 11 months.
But like as far as we know, it's we're new to it because whatever.
Yeah.
So
it's just not her movie, so it didn't really get fully developed, and that's a thing. It's not the worst thing either because it's not really her movie. It's Tyrese and Paul Walker.
It's Brian's once again, yeah. When we were debating whether it was more her or Suki, like the way that I was, just in terms of her position, like she is to a certain extent the female partner of the guy that Brian is investigating, the same way that Brian in the first movie is investigating Dom and Letty is his partner. I was kind of thinking of Monica Fuentes like that, but ultimately I think Suki is a little bit of a better fit, if only because to some of the points that Nico mentioned about like flipping gender roles, and I think it's just a more kind of like a harder, more traditionally coded male, I think, right? So
yeah, closer to that at least.
Let's talk about Suki for a little bit. Do you know who plays Suki? And then what do you think of her character, the way she's portrayed, the way that her sexuality is portrayed as well?
I do not know who plays Suki. I liked her character. I believe my exact words at the beginning of the film were, "Oh my god, and they're Japanese, I love them!" I loved that this movie started off by trying to introduce other aspects of what was a predominantly, for lack of a better term, stereotypically white and black dominated interpretation of street racing, with all Asian people being this vilified kind of Yakuza in the first film. Here we had kind of a more nuanced look at things. Honestly, every brown person was evil, which I wasn't crazy about. As a Cuban man, I just maybe wish they hadn't been like, let's go to Miami where we can find all the Latino villains. But it's what they did, and we're stuck with that now, I guess. Suki, honestly, I'm excited because she really hits a lot of my buttons. I don't really feel like I got enough from her in this film. I don't feel like I got enough from anybody in this film. I thought huge sequences of this film were the Hot Wheels commercials from my childhood. This movie had less plot than the first one.
Oh, absolutely.
By far. Because I was making a special note of that, 15 minutes in, nothing has happened. There's no plot at all. We just see Brian knows these people. We're being introduced into the world, and I think in terms of the limited-ish character development that we get, we know who these people are to a certain extent, and I think that that's nice. But also later in the movie, when Brian shows up and they're playing poker, that's a minute and a half long scene that has nothing to do with anything. And then at the end of it, Brian's like, "All right, I'm going to bed, man," and that's it. And it's just wait, what? And this movie is not very long. It feels like the entire actual plot of this could have fit in a 45-minute SVU episode or something, right? It doesn't feel like it requires an hour 40, and yet I think the visual nature of all this makes this a very kind of fascinating, interesting, weird kind of movie.
I found a quote from Vin Diesel from 2015 where he talked about how he was less taken with what the scriptwriters had in mind for this film, and he said, and yeah, this is a quote, "They didn't take a Francis Ford Coppola approach to it. They approached it like they did sequels in the 80s and 90s, where they would drum up a new story, unrelated for the most part, and slap the name on it." Yes, let's all take a moment for that Francis Ford Coppola comment. Fantastic. Otherwise, overall, I think he has a really excellent point. And I said to Nico earlier, if you just changed Brian's name and backstory, and you changed the name of this movie, this would instead feel like part of a different Paul Walker car trilogy. It has Fast and the Furious, this, and Joyride. And it's just Paul Walker with a different male co-star and getting in trouble with cars in every movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it lifts pretty, as far as I can tell, it feels like it pretty much just lifts right out, but we also don't know.
This movie and Tokyo Drift, we love, Tokyo Drift is one of our favorites. It's hard to rank these because we do genuinely love all of them, but this is pretty consistently toward the bottom of people's favorites. It feels, to your point, it kind of feels inessential. It does kind of lift out. You don't really need this movie, but I think we do get a lot of great development, and especially the certain characters, and I won't tip my hat, I mean, you probably know, but certain characters that continue, I think we get really great introductions here, and then other ones, people that we would love to see back don't necessarily have much of a development, so we want more from those certain characters.
Yeah, this could have easily been the turbocharged prelude for 4. If this would have been the, in-between piece, it would have made a lot more sense to get you to 4. But, 2 and 3, you're right, they kind of sit separately, and that's why people rank them weird, because to be honest, if you didn't see 2 or 3, it wouldn't make a difference between you seeing 4. You would never have lost the characters to have to bring them back. So
right, because they're reintroduced effectively in 4 and 5, right? So
yeah.
In a weird way, and I don't know if Nico and Kevo, if you have the same perspective, given that you've only seen these movies once, but I think almost the most interesting, and it's not mentioned really at all, it's very, very glossed over, the most interesting character development in here is kind of Brian, getting reeled back into police work, but also, how Bilkins goes from being LAPD to, did he get unceremoniously railed out of town because he screwed up on the Dom case, or did he go by choice? I think the Bilkins storyline going from being Brian's boss in the first one to basically being Brian's boss again here with Nico, with your guy James Remar, the Bilkins transition is one of the more interesting things, at least 7 watches deep, and they don't really care about that much at all.
No, he's just back because he was in the first one.
Yeah.
But there's no explanation on how he got from California to Florida. It seemed like they're trying to pitch it like he's coming back to bring Brian back in, right? Because he knows Brian, he can kind of be his handler. They don't really do that, and he kind of stays and becomes Brian's boss there.
Let's talk about, do you guys have a particular, at all, affinity toward Bilkins, and also please give us your thoughts on James Remar, because I know that at least Nico is very excited to talk about James Remar.
I just think he's super hot. Okay. Straight up, he's just a hot old man.
I get it.
But beyond that, in some ways, Fast and the Furious is kind of like a cool high school kind of movie. All the teachers are bumbling morons. And all law enforcement in these films are bumbling morons.
Yeah.
I don't know, because doesn't Bilkins kind of seem like he got bumped up to the FBI?
That's what's I wonder if this was by choice, because they don't capture Dom. We see Dom in the credits of 1 driving through Mexico, right? We don't see.
It seems like Bilkins got a promotion. If he's handling this case, he has been promoted, but now he seems kind of he seemed kind of put upon, and things were hard for him in the first movie. But here, he almost seems haha, let's do the bad thing.
And also, him in his, Hawaiian shirt, it was my day off. He does seem to be, a more relaxed. Maybe he retired. Maybe he's just, I'm moving to Florida. I'm at the end of my career. And they're oh, the FBI. I don't know. I'm fascinated by this Bilkins transition. And, the movie does not give a shit, because why would the movie care? And Bilkins also never. I will spoil. Bilkins never comes back, unfortunately. But, I want answers to my Bilkins questions.
Maybe he'll be the bad guy of Fast Furious 12.
I would love it. Maybe he's the voice, Joe. I won't say what that means. But what if Bilkins is the voice?
Oh, God. Yeah, maybe.
Is he still alive? Who are you? I don't know your name. I'm sorry, man. Tom Barry. Are you still alive? Yeah, all right. He's going to turn 70 this December. We could do it. Come on, Tom Barry. Come back to us.
Come back.
Yeah, that's not bad. That could do a cameo.
Septuagenarians are absolutely still badasses.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What did you guys think of the stare and drive?
Ugh.
It wasn't super hot for you? You didn't want to just fall into Brian's eyes?
Nico doesn't even remember what you're talking about.
Oh, it's when they're driving, when Brian is driving and Monica Fuentes is in the passenger seat.
Yes.
And she's like, you might want to keep your eyes on the road there, Playboy. And he's like, you think we're going to crash? And she's like, I haven't made up my mind yet. And he just stares at her while they do 100 down a surface road and then stop exactly at the stoplight. And then Roman says, you doing the stare and drive? He learned that from me.
Oh, yes. Okay. I thought that was stupid.
No, I don't find that sexy. I find Paul Walker sexy, sure, but do I find that road hazard sexy? No.
And and let me. So I've been watching a lot of true story or creepypasta sort of YouTube videos lately because I need some way to relax at night. I listen to this one guy, and he just happens to use a lot of kind of, I guess, similar sounding stories. And maybe it is just that everybody's true life story kind of comes out in the same creepypasta generator style. They all sort of end with the same, shortly after that, we moved out. And it was for unrelated reasons. My dad got a new job in another part of the country, and we relocated. But I never forgot that time that my boyfriend nearly stabbed me in the head. Right? But, like, there's this one in particular that I just heard. It was like this woman was dating a skydiving instructor for a few weeks, and he was like, let's jump out of this plane. It's a night jump. And, like, right before they jumped, he was like, I've decided to end it all and take you with me. And he was just, like, fucking with her. And when they got on the ground, you know, she's like, flash forward 4 years later. Me and that guy got married. JK, I dumped his ass. And I'm like, all right. There are things that kind of translate in this photo cell of a John Hughes movie where it has all the beats of right and it has all the hits of correct. Sometimes you can't figure out what it is, why it just doesn't have that, why, like, your favorite song by this one band wasn't as big as all the others, right?
Yeah.
This is not one of those situations. I can point to the amateurishness of this script, and it's the script. It's really the script that reads like the flavor text on a fucking basketball card. I don't know who came up with these characters, but, like, Brian is not the same character. This Brian is kind of a schmuck. Roman is not the same lovable dickbag that Dom is, and I mean, I wouldn't want him to be, but, like, I don't know that I'm walking away from this film feeling like, yes, I trust Roman. To some extent, I'm kind of like, I'm a little afraid for Roman. If Roman misses a dose, he might have a bad day.
What I picked up on this, I mean, at the end of this movie, when he turns in the extra 3 bags of money, without spoiling where he winds up, I'm like, that is so against type of where he will be in a few movies that, like, he would never, in a future movie, Roman would never give up that money. This is a very different, angrier, more determined, more focused.
But he's trying to get free too. You have to remember that, because at this point he's not a free man. So he's, like, fulfilling his duty to get his freedom back, which is that plays a little bit.
And speaking of fulfilling his D, let's talk about fulfilling his destiny. He has the smash factor.
Oh,
immediately we both agreed that was what his power was within, like, a minute of him appearing on screen.
Is that his ability to just punch through windows, that smash factor, or what smash factor?
If he's around, people can crash cars and survive illogically.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He can also punch through windows, you know, and, like, when they kick out that windshield later on in the movie and it comes out beautifully instead of showering them in little bits of glass like it would have, he's got the smash factor, and that makes him the smasher, right? And he's got the smash speed when he needs it. I also want to talk for a moment about how much I fucking love that Brian got to upgrade to Limit Break level 2.
Okay.
In the beginning of the movie, he flies, and I immediately went, he just flew. He just flew. Now he can speed fly.
Yes.
He started to level up. He unlocked the power of flight, and then by the end, he almost has mastery of it.
Absolutely. He figures out how to crash a boat party.
Yeah.
And I feel like his ability to further unlock the fast force was given to him by the virtue of being so close to the furious force for so long from Dom. Oh. By giving, like, because you almost can see more of Dom and Brian in this movie.
Yes.
Like, I mean, and the thing is, I love Tyrese as both a performer and as, like, a dude, but his acting chops here are not quite the acting chops I'm going to be looking for in later films.
Well, same thing with Paul Walker, too.
I've seen later Paul Walker, and I don't know that I think Paul Walker gets significantly better, but, like, I know Tyrese does.
Okay.
There's parts of this that are like, so everybody took an improv or public speaking class at some point in their life, and everybody had that one guy who's really innately funny, but then when he tries to do the improv, it always comes off very wooden. Ha ha. That, your mom too. Yeah, sick burn. And, like, so much of Tyrese's delivery in this movie was that. The one thing that made it much better was his chemistry with Paul Walker.
Yes.
Was extraordinary. Brian and Roman, number one, they have fucked. I do not care what anyone says. They have scissor-dicked themselves to death.
They've jerked off with eye contact. That's not a question.
Oh, absolutely. And like one time, like I bet one time Roman was even like, "You want to do it for me?" And like meaning it kind of playfully. And Brian just like couldn't help himself and reached out. No, I'm kidding.
Why do you always make them cry?
Oh, well, I just think it's funny because I automatically go to Tobias Funke crying in the shower.
Oh, okay.
That's
Never
like
nude.
exactly where I go.
Got it.
Never nude. There are literally dozens of us.
Dozens,
Or
Michael.
is it tens of us? Is it
It's
dozens?
dozens.
It dozens.
It's
Good for
dozens.
me. Roman has these things about him where he's like, yeah, well, I got you. Ha 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 ha. And it doesn't come off like cocky. It comes off like a bully who forgot to take his Adderall that day.
I love the authenticity of the petulance of Brian saying, "You still fight like shit. You still fight like shit," while they were fighting. That felt so real.
Like maybe Tyrese threw a punch a little too hard in rehearsal or something.
Yes. So this is the theory that we have, and I'm glad you guys saw this and totally brought this up. I have a theory that we know that Brian and Tyrese became really good friends on the set of this movie, and they would often get in trouble for like hanging out too much and partying too much in Miami because they were in Miami, so they were like showing up to set late and like getting in trouble. You see the real chemistry between Brian and Tyrese, but they also like have given up on the film, so they're like just totally mailing in their lines for a lot of it, but you can still see that they're actually friends and having fun. So that's why you get like all the great moments of like that you still fight like shit and stuff like that, but also it feels like Tyrese is just like off because he's mailing it in or hungover from partying with Brian all night, for partying with Paul Walker all night.
I appreciate that perspective, and in some ways it actually makes me like this movie a little bit more.
If somebody had said to me, no, the cast of Miami Vice gave up on the movie halfway through it. What is it about Miami movies? That's why I brought up Dorothy's Bornak, because I'm in Miami.
That's
So,
true. That's true.
I agree with Kevo. Although the parts of this movie were just straight up Camp Nowhere for cars.
I think from the 2003 end of this, I probably really wouldn't like this movie. It would probably very much turn me off from the franchise because it feels just really cheap and it doesn't have the same emotional core that you could even see in the first movie. Knowing that it's a franchise that continues and having spin-offs, like, so minor movies that can lift out don't really matter as much from this perspective 17 years later. It's just a really risky gambit as your second outing if you want any sort of longevity.
That is
Wait.
the craziest thing, that like as the second movie, and to a certain extent Tokyo Drift as the third movie, the fact that they got a third, like I think the fact that
third
they got a
one is
second
going to
one,
be the hardest to.
Yeah.
It's great, but everything that you're saying about 2, you're going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe they made a fourth one after this, for
right.
sure.
Once you have 4 and 4 kind of resets and reestablishes things, then you're like, okay, cool, like we have a thing, we're going forward with the thing, whatever. Even though 4 is not wildly successful financially, they at least looks like they have a plan. When you're seeing 2 and 3, even as somebody who like loves cars, because like the movies transition from being car movies to action movies, even if you love cars, you're like, what is this even about? Like, who are these people? Why do I care? To see this movie spawn a sequel and then to see 3 spawn a sequel, it's just like, whoa, okay. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, Kevo. It's just like, it's crazy that like this is what they wound up with and that it still was successful enough for them to be like, yeah, we'll keep going.
And I really get and appreciate that because there are a lot of things that I love, most specifically in the last few years, Once Upon a Time and The Magicians, where the first seasons of these shows, I feel like I have to make so many apologies for them.
Yeah.
Once you love the show, when you go back and watch the early stuff, you find tons of things to love and enjoy because you understand where the characters are going to go. You understand the position they were in at the time when they were making it, so you just have a better perspective. But when you're first introducing it to someone, it sucks to have to be like, just push through, please. Because
Yeah.
I promise there are good things, but it's a really rough start.
Yeah, like it's a weird thing to see writers develop their voice, and I think this is a little different because these are different screenwriters. I mean, Chris Morgan will take over shortly and basically do all of them, and Justin Lin will direct most of them, so there's going to be consistency. But here, it's like, instead of having like a writer's room develop the Once Upon a Time characters. It's like, okay, we know roughly who, Brian O'Connor is, but now everything else is new. Do something with cars. And it's like, well, okay. It's strange.
I actually felt that while I really do stick with my theory that this is a superhero film series, and I can't wait to explain to you how Tej is the ignition technician and his ability...
The remix to ignition technician?
If a plan is unlikely and you bring him in, he can get it started, right? But we'll get to that in a minute, right? Because otherwise there were not that many racers. He literally did the Twilight bark and summoned all 101 Dalmatians. It's true. But I kind of think that there is a lot to be said about the parallels between Fast and Furious 1 through 3 and Halloween 1 through 3, where there's these weird connective tissue threads, almost like muscle adhesions, blurring the lines between 1 and 2 in a way where they kind of overlap, but it's an ugly overlap where you already told part of this and you're telling it again in a way that changes it in an unnatural way, almost like you're retrofitting a redesign as though the first one was never there. Kind of like partial retcon culture, partial reboot culture in a lot of ways. And then the third one is just off the wall unrelated, ultimately has come to be significant to the franchise and its success.
And I would say, in ways that you have no idea, Season of the Witch and Tokyo Drift are both wonderful, and maybe, arguably, on a certain day, like, my favorite in each franchise. I don't know that, like, Season of the Witch I'll ever like it more than the first one, but, like, it's wonderful in its weirdness. Tokyo Drift is wonderful, and like it's like I don't know how this really fits in like certain things do, but your metaphor, your comparison is almost more insightful than you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I also feel exactly the same way, where it's very much like, I don't know that you'll ever get me to say that there is a better grindhouse porn rebirth of horror movies. Like, I don't think there is a better one from that era than Halloween. But if you told me I could only have Halloween or Season of the Witch ever again, I might have to save Season of the Witch for posterity's sake.
Silver Shamrock, baby.
It's a tough one, man. And then, like, if you try to fuck with me about Halloween 4, like, Halloween 4 is another one that's just, like, so perfect.
I don't know if I've ever seen 4, but okay.
That isn't 4 the one with the little girl who becomes possessed by Michael Myers and, like, kills her family, and then at the end she's holding the knife, and it's like, oh my god, she is the new Michael Myers. And then the 5th one starts with them being like, JK, she's fine.
Love it. Love it. So let's talk about Tej as the ignition technician. Please, let's talk about him. Thank you.
So clearly they realized that Ja Rule's character didn't make any sense in the first film. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes across really clearly.
They offered Ja Rule a lot of money, or they offered it like they offered him a part in 2, and he said, no, I want more money. They're like, cool, never mind. And then they got Ludacris, and then like after the fact, like after he saw Ludacris or whatever, he's like, oh, I should have. But like they wanted to get Ja Rule back, believe it or not.
That is embarrassing.
You know.
Essentially, Ja Rule walked around like a bar mitzvah hype guy, and
oh god,
just sort of kept being like,
everybody get it up, we're getting excited, bump up and down.
And that's like all he did the whole film. Like, I mean, basically, he was that stoplight at the beginning of Mario Kart. It's really hard to have less agency than women in these movies, and he did.
Didn't listen.
Then we get Tej, and from the moment Tej walks on screen and we see that big motherfucking honkin' ludicrous, beautiful, God-given afro, right? The quality of his melanin runs through him in a way that Ja Rule's blackness was used performatorily by the directors to be like, oh, look, and we have a black guy. There is something so much more authentically real about both Roman and Tej as black men in this environment and in this construct that does kind of balance out how annoyed I am about the portrayal of all Latinos in this film. You know, it's just so hard to see black men treated fairly in action films. It's really a rarity to find them used as something other than the muscle. So getting to see we didn't really get much of it, but I feel like if he runs a garage for these kind of cars, he's got to be a tech master. So I sort of projected him into like a category of on the same level as Johnny Tran. Oh, I call everybody, the bad guys are always the dark writers. The first movie was Johnny Tran. This movie was obviously, I keep going to call him Miami Capote. What was
Carter
his name?
Verone.
Carter Verone. He's not Miami Capote. That's
a
fair.
good name, though.
by making Verone this very prissy and look at me cut the head of this penis cigar off, like it's so over the top that he might as well be like, I crack nuts. You know what I mean? Like it's so fucking stupid, right? That he's such an over the top villain. There's something magical about the way that Tej gives so little information but pops off the screen, kind of like a John Constantine. You know, to make a really weird example, a Frasier Crane.
Oh.
Frasier was meant to be this really minor character on Cheers and disappear after 2 episodes. There was something so fucking ridiculous about this character that everybody needed it, and Kelsey Grammer went on to play the most consistent live-action character in television history. Tej has that sort of mystery factor, and that's part of what makes it so easy to project greatness onto him. Because he is said to own a shop, because he's the guy to go to. I kind of wondered why he wasn't a racer. That's kind of a level of agency I don't... Right, he has an injury. But I don't project that same level of agency onto Suki, because Suki isn't given ownership of things the way Tej is. There's sort of an implicit sense of property ownership in these films per the real estate of a car that translates to an inherent value. And by giving Tej a garage, you've given him a space station in the age of rockets. And I think that is really why he leaps off the screen despite such minimal dialogue.
For him not talking as much, he's like the most memorable part of this movie. And as much as Roman is doing all of the like character things, Tej is like the one that you're like, oh shit, we definitely need him back for sure.
Absolutely.
I think what's also interesting, the way that they're portrayed, right? Like, Roman is kind of our entry point. Like, Brian's the character we're following, but, like, Roman's the one new to this world. And so, in a way that, like, Dom is introducing Brian to race wars and to things in the first movie, Brian's introducing Roman to things like Tej's boat races, right? And so, like, we're learning about the mystique, the aura of this man, the way that we're introduced to him with, like, just seeing his afro from the back, and then the phone, and then the mouth. Like, we don't really see him, and then he comes out and he's like the MC. Like,
but Tej is kind of the Dom of Miami, right? Like, that's what we're...
Tej runs shit, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of, like, the actual, like, the narrative, like, not the role they play, but, like, the way that, like, Brian is ushering Roman and us. Like, Brian has been established for some amount of time, right? Like, long enough to develop a relationship with Tej that when they need a fourth racer, Tej calls him, and then he'll get a cut of the winnings, right? Like, he's been there long enough to be in on the scene, so as he shows Roman, like, the boat races, like, here's who you need to know, here's who's cool, here's Suki, she does this, or whatever, he's showing us, too, and it's the same thing, like, Dom welcoming Brian and showing Brian, Neptune's Net, and the food shack, and the, the garage, and the race wars, and whatever, right? So, because Roman is us, he's inherently less interesting?
I don't know that I think that Roman is less interesting. I think it's that Roman has a real Raphael vibe.
Like the Ninja Turtle Raphael?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
In the first movie, Dom is kind of like a put-upon Italian Leonardo. In that first movie, Brian is kind of the straight-laced... It's so hard because Roman goes a place that most characters don't get to go. He's meant to be cockily unlikable. When you think about unlikable characters because they're cocky, you think of House, Rick from Rick and Morty. You think of these too cool for their school kind of guys. But Roman is boisterous. Roman is loud. Roman is that guy that's like, I have so much sex because of my big penis. You kind of have to be like, oh, okay, buddy. And he's like, what do you do today? I fuck. And like, okay, pal, calm down. We all know that you penis, right? And like, he's a very specific kind of brash that makes him a different kind of questionable than Dom. These are interesting characters in a very uninteresting film.
And I think that you'll get the best parts of this without the worst parts as the series goes on.
Yes, that's true. I can agree with that.
I'm super duper in on it.
So it seems like overall you liked parts of this movie but didn't like the movie overall. Is that fair to say? Or is that a too over-characterization or under-characterization of your thoughts about this?
No, that's pretty fair. Yeah.
I mean, I will say without going too much deeper, like this is one, like I said before, people like it but aren't crazy about it in the grand scheme of things. Like, the series is going to reach a pinnacle in a couple of movies, but one movie at a time, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
One of the things that I most like about this is I enjoy just like the coloring of it. It like feels like very Miami and the neon of it. And when we talk about it, we're like, that's like our favorite part of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, you could pretty much put this movie on mute and play the score from the first one.
Yeah.
And be fine.
Oh, but I did like the score of this movie. It was David Arnold who composed for Stargate and Independence Day and a whole bunch of other good stuff,
Big over-the-topness.
which explains a very 90s vibe.
What did you guys think about the color palette of this movie? Because in the first movie, I don't know if we talked about it last time. You might have read it in the trivia, but like the director Rob Cohen had literally asked houses to paint their outsides more muted colors so the cars popped more. Like the focus was clearly on the cars. And here it's like an overwhelming, like we're in Miami. There's no doubt about that. Everything is colorful. The outfits are colorful. The cars are colorful. The background's colorful. Like the credits are colorful. Did you think that worked, or do you think that didn't? Did that sort of distract? Like was it too much?
I know you guys are like, oh yeah, I loved the Miami. This is not Miami. This is so muted for what Miami should be.
It's toned down too much already. Still.
Yeah, this is not vibrant. It was nice, but like we watched it in HD on an HD TV streaming at high quality, and like it could have been brighter.
Whew.
Yeah.
Fair. That's awesome, though.
This won't mean anything to you guys yet, but Joe, when they're talking about Tanya in this movie, I was like, I wonder if Tanya and No Knees Denise know each other.
Oh my god, yeah.
Right? We never talked about that, but there might be a history. There might be a shared history there. So
They might be friends. The last one that I saw that I never got to when we were talking about like the most Letty moment, Monica Fuentes, Brian's like, how long have you been a cop? And she's like, oh, I've lost track. And I was like, oh, it's like, I don't, you know what I mean? It was a very Letty moment. Yeah, so.
I don't mean this shitty, but if you've forgotten how long you have been a cop, I kind of feel maybe, perhaps, like it's time to put the badge down because all the days have blurred into one.
I think you might need to be put on disability because you can't tell your days apart. You do not look old enough to not be able to tell years of how long since you graduated from police academy training.
Guys, I heard Ava Mendez is starting the sundown, but it's a Miami sundown, so it's really neon.
And that right there sort of epitomizes a lot of the problems with this script. That is a very lazy way of not giving an answer to that question, but making it seem like a really long time.
do you guys have any other thoughts about this movie, or do you want to play a couple games?
Like, I'm sad that the next movie isn't the organic next film, but I'm really glad to get back to my sweet Dom. Vin Diesel is just so nice to look at.
And he'll get more and more ripped as we go, too, so.
You know, last episode we were sort of surprised by your shared affection toward Johnny Tran, your admiration of Johnny Tran's beauty. Was there someone in this movie that we might not be, like, is it James Remar? Who surprised you with their hotness in this movie? Is there anybody?
I appreciate that question.
Yeah, I mean, like, James Remar is like goal pain bottom daddy sub. Like, he is just like the dream. Like, I just want to get him a really beautiful collar and just like kick him occasionally, and you just love it. Beyond that, who is the bad guy? Rutger Hauer, Cole
Carter
Hauser.
Verone.
What was it?
Rutger Hauer, Carter Verone. Yes.
So he's actually the grandson of one of the actual Warners, like the Warners.
Is he really?
Yeah, and he's the son of a screenwriter and dropped out of high school to use his family's connections to become an actor. When he was 16 years old, married one of the actresses from the WWOR UPN syndicated version of Sweet Valley High. He's pretty, but in a way that if I looked at him, I would be like, you're pretty in a kind of like forgettable way. And I'm actually not that attracted to Paul Walker in the first place. Like, generally, he's not my thing. He's a little too pretty boy for me. I like him with a little bit more wear and tear. Like, give me a good acne scar.
I was going to say, and I think you would probably agree, what was the Latino guy with the orange color palette typically who was rude? He was a douche.
Yeah, that's a Maureen Nolasco. He plays Sucre on Prison Break. That's what I know him from.
The character is deplorable, but if you're asking who was the surprise hottie of this film, yeah, probably him.
I also enjoyed the two guys who were told, dance in this one place in this scene behind Ava Mendez without looking at her tits.
In that scene, it's not that part, but I do like that as they're walking through the club and there's the floating chairs, the chairs suspended by chains from the ceiling, she like spins one of the chairs. Like as she walks by, I'm like, that wasn't in this. Like she just like doing it. Like the lady's spinning in the chair and she's like, yeah, we're going to do that. And like just as they're walking by, but we love Mrs. Ryan Gosling on this, so
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
we're big Ava Mendes fans. So
You know, like, I don't know if it's just the fact that I am, like, Cuban, so, like, I grew up around a lot of beautiful brown ladies, but, like, when I think of, like, the women who take my breath away, Ava Mendes is so high up my fucking
Yeah.
list. She is just an unacceptably beautiful level of beautiful. Like I think one of the most beautiful women on earth is Leighton Meester. Like, it's really hard to come close to Leighton Meester in that episode of The Orville for me. Like, that is the most perfect a woman can look.
Really? Okay.
At number 2, alternates between Fergie at every point in her life that isn't that moment where she Peter Pants on stage, and Ella D. Young in the Electra costume, right? That switches between 2 and 4 all the time. But I think Ava Mendes in this movie might be my permanent number 3.
Wow. Okay. Very, very cool. The last thing I want to get your opinion on, I sort of like hinted at this earlier. I don't think we ever got there, but for as good as this franchise is at representation, and we will see that as the movies go on, they are adding more actors of color and everything, and like there's a lot of representation here. The one thing that is distinctly and sorely lacking in is queer representation. I think that's just kind of like you guys did a whole thing on MCU about like how heteronormative and like how overtly hetero, like how they have to like have Captain America like very clearly hitting on Peggy Carter or hitting on, you know, her niece or whatever, right? Like it's like we need to prove that he is a straight dude. The closest thing I think we get to a queer character in any of these movies really is Suki. And I don't know if you picked up on that. I don't know if that's something like...
No. I have gay sex, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've had gay sex in the last 24 hours, even. I'm telling you, the gayest thing in these films is definitely Roman and Brian.
Okay.
There's one particular line that Suki says where Tej is hitting on her and she says, make sure you come back with the right parts or something like that. And so, like, it's hinting at that. And then later, you know, after her front end, wink, wink, gets damaged, and then, you know, she basically decides to bring it by the garage. Who knows how that's going to turn out? But, like, it's the one thing that this franchise is lacking. We have a theory as the franchise goes on in terms of a character who we kind of hoped was gay and maybe isn't, but I just wanted to get your take on that. But if the high watermark is Roman and Brian, you know, we're okay with that.
I just kind of assume it's going to be Bow Wow because, you know, there's all those Bow Wow is gay in real life rumors. And we would be happy to have him. Real handsome dude. Yeah, fascinated to see how this goes. Hopefully it's not Charlize Theron. I love her as an actress, and I kind of love her as a person for the most part, but every time I try and imagine her in anything, she's just evil.
Well, we will see in Fate of the Furious. I don't want to spoil anything.
I assume she has to be evil in this, and if she's an evil dyke in this, I just don't have the gay patience for it.
Well, we will get there in 6 movies, so just buckle up. Proverbially.
Always buckle up. It's the law.
Always buckle up. But next, guys, you know it's time for This Ain't No 10-Second Race, a.k.a. Boy Do We Have a Podcast for you. So if you'll remember last time, we played a game where each of us went on twitter.com on the Bird app, and we found the tweet. Somebody ostensibly would enjoy the podcast. Somebody tweeted about something. We replied to them by saying, boy, do we have a podcast for you. We see if they respond, if they like, retweet, favorite, or like, retweet, reply, or email us. You get points. And as we know, almost immediately, not on air, but almost immediately following it, Nico had a really good showing. So let's see. While you guys look for new tweets, I already have mine. I'm just going to say that. But
Okay.
While you look for new tweets, I'm going to review last episode's. I found Claudia, dragon emoji, at Claudia Ruiz. Okay, but nobody talks about how hot Johnny Tran is in the Fast and Furious. Boy, do we have a podcast, for you. Nothing. Joe, you found Jake Landy at Jake and Snake's Fast and Furious Melrose Place Drift. Sounds like a promising future for the franchise. Boy, do we have a podcast, for you. Nothing.
We didn't talk about Melrose Place at all this episode. Oh,
Well, now you can. It's not
That's
over
fine.
yet. Now, Nico, you found Michael Jenkins at MJJ Writes in Hell. Jared Leto's Joker gives you a tribal tattoo and reads the plot to all 29 Fast and Furious films for eternity. Boy, do we have a podcast for you. And this is almost unprecedented. Michael retweeted, so that's 2 points. He liked it, so that's a 3rd point. He replied, which is 5 more points. And he also followed us, which is not a thing that we have a metric for. Joe, how many points should we give for a follow?
I think at least 5 or 10, right?
Because we had email as a 10, so like I think a follow's got to be 10. So Nico, I think you get 18 points on this one.
I'm like literally prouder than you'd think.
No, you should be, because you are now in 3rd place, within striking distance of me and Joe after 1 gameplay. It's crazy how good that was.
Yeah, that was really good.
Kevo, you found Adrian Purr at OMG Adrian. I just found out that all the cars from the Fast and Furious series were cakes. Boy, do we have a podcast for you. It got a like, but it was from the Mikester, so that does not count, unfortunately. So, Kevo, you, like me and Joe, struck out. But Nico held it down for 18 points, is the highest single tweet that we've ever sent out. It's crazy.
Yes, yeah.
Insane.
For sure.
Well, I have found my tweet for you.
All right, if you want to either DM it to Too Fast, Too Forever, or just drop it in the Discord chat, that would be fine. Oh, I forgot that wasn't really Kevo's, that was Nico's, but, like, Kevo, you can commiserate with us, me and Joe, just, like, we're very sad because we're not good at this game, so...
Yeah.
His points are my points, so it's fine.
He kept, I guess Nico, his history was true that he kept the better homework for himself, right? So...
Can I just tell you guys who to look up?
Sure, I can do that.
Cole Tucker, 4202, rolling your Hot Wheels across her titties as a response to normalize using toys during sex. And I don't think any tweet quite so succinctly encapsulates my contributions to this fucking show the way that does.
Boy, do we. I just retweeted that. Boy do we
Have a
podcast for you. Now, you got to find another one, or Kevo, you can find one. And Joe, do you have one, or have you not
I have
found
one.
yet?
I have
All
one.
right.
I'm posting it in the Discord chat. It's from Jillian at Emo Canadian, but she was responding to Kyle for President. And she says, have you seen Too Fast, Too Furious? It's already been proven. Brian and Roman are disgraced old gay lovers. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Boy,
do we have a podcast for you.
I found one for Kevo, and I'm just so excited to share it because I mean,
Please.
it can't beat that. If you look up gender hack G3NDR HVCKR, they tweeted, begin transmission, tell 45P3CT to put up the flyers, end transmission, and they used an app called Cheap Bots Done Quick that is also very relevant to me. That their most recent tweet, the creator of this bot now has a Patreon. Click here to support me.
What?
Patreon.com/hologramvin, which is amazing. And Vin
Thank
has
you!
23 patrons at $79 a month.
Wow.
Fuck! Right? I wonder if they're just other bots sharing the wealth.
This is how the bot revolution starts.
Nico, what did you search for to find this tweet?
Transmission.
Yeah, I decided to start looking for car parts, and when I was looking through transmission and saw so much COVID, I wound up getting really raptured by the numbers, and then this was just down there somewhere.
It works.
Perfect. I am going to go with younger Asian kid at Choco Days, feel like pure shit, just want Suki back in the Fast and Furious franchise, and then a gif of Suki from the beginning of the movie saying, "What's up, Bullet? Boy, do we have a podcast."
He definitely
for
gets
you.
us. There was a tweet that was like, are there any major Latino celebrities that haven't revealed themselves to be anti-Black Lives Matter still? Do we at least still have Ava Mendez? And a lot of people were like, she doesn't count because she doesn't work anymore. And then somebody put, and I guess you can say she doesn't open her damn mouth. And I was like, I guess that's all true, so we're not going to use that one.
It's very sad. Also, she's a full-time mom. Let's normalize moms working. That's a very important job.
You're allowed to retire whenever you want. She's paid. Let her go. Yeah, she doesn't have to work because we want to see her in more movies. Fuck
Also,
us.
she's got to support what I can only imagine is Ryan Gosling's fragile ego.
Oh, true.
He's just an actor, right? So, okay. The final game, and I'm going to give you guys a choice again whether you want to be on my team and give clues or Joe's team and once again guess clues. Dude, what's my car? A car picture from Hector Pena. So do you guys want to help
we're
me
gonna
give
we're gonna
clues?
guess.
You're going to guess again. Okay.
Okay.
We're all guess.
This is from Hector.
'Kay.
Hey, Joey's. Got another car pick for y'all. This is a new sports car, hint, that can rival similar cars. He says it's the fastest hatchback on the Nürburgring that he knows of.
Ooh.
It's a Korean car. He says it's proved to him that South Korea can make good sports cars as well as the cars that are heavy hitters from Japan. Here it is. Gotta go. Stay fast. Stay furious. So it's a South Korean
The
car.
BTS Veloster.
It's a Veloster.
I was gonna say a Hyundai Veloster. I didn't know they made a new one.
They made a 20.
Is
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Is it-
There's only like
2020
one Korean
Veloster
car
N.
maker. Hyundai.
Okay,
Hyundai.
hold on. I said a BTS Veloster because the only thing I know from Korea is BTS, and then I randomly picked a car that I thought was German.
Well, you got it right. It's a Hyundai Veloster. It's a 2020 Hyundai
Oh my God.
Veloster.
Yeah, you nailed that.
I'm the
Wow.
best at all of your games.
Yes.
Do we
you
want to
nailed
do
it.
another one, or do you want to just call
No,
it a
I
day?
think
No,
we
I'm
crushed
going
it.
out a king.
Yeah, we crushed it. That was
Okay.
it.
Wow.
That was awesome, dude.
When you said that, I was like, are you able to see my screen? Because like I did not expect it to be a wildly difficult one, but I did not expect, no offense, Nico, I did not expect you to get it. I expected Joe to get it, but like when you
Yeah.
just came out of the gate before
It's
Joe could
awesome.
guess, that was unbelievable.
Round of
I just
applause
said a
for me, for
BTS
serious.
Veloster. Thank you for steering
like,
me
BTS
in the
was
right
but, like,
direction.
yeah, it's kind of like, if this was Jeopardy, I'd be like, can you be more specific? You'd be like, no, and I'd be like, all right. But like, you got the last name right, essentially, so.
Yeah, it's like that episode of Golden Girls where they say the final Jeopardy question is who's buried in Grant's tomb. Dorothy says Ulysses Grant, and she's wrong because the answer is Cary Grant. They didn't specify which Grant or which tomb.
I thought it was no one. Is Cary Grant buried there?
I don't think Cary Grant is buried in Ulysses Grant's tomb.
Yeah, I thought no one's buried in the tomb.
Is Cary Grant dead? Oh, that's
he's-
Carrie Elways.
No, yes.
Right.
I would be devastated if we'd lost Carrie Elways. Because then how could we get one of these amazing at-home come-together fake reunions of Men in Tights?
Well, as long as Josh Gad is out there, he's going to do his best to bring people back from the dead to get these things to happen, right? So.
I love Josh Gad.
And we love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us once
thank
again
you guys.
on
Seriously.
Too Fast, Too Forever. Thank you so much. If you guys want to plug whatever you want to plug, do you want to plug HTML, which is in the midst of Fantastic Four, or X's for Podcast? Are there any Captain Britain or Marvel Man episodes of that show coming up anytime soon, or no?
There's a Captain Britain Next X, so keep a sharp ear out for the midpoint on the Alan Moore, Alan Davis transformative run of Captain Britain, which ultimately saw the creation of the numerical system of the multiverse of the Marvel Universe. So that whole 6161606 kind of nonsense business, all that numerical shit, that comes from this. So if you're looking for a deeper understanding of a weird British old wizard and what he thinks a superhero should be like, definitely listen to that. Or if you want to hear some slightly more normal stuff, check out HTML, where we're talking about the different iterations of the Fantastic Four, or our other episodes of X's for Podcast, where we're currently making sure to break down every issue of the weekly X-Men releases as they come out. We have an unbelievable slew of guest hosts coming up in the next couple of weeks. Keep an ear out. We have the folks from shows like Vox Krakoa. And don't forget to keep listening. We have some giveaways coming up. Ooh. And yeah, we're very excited. So you definitely want to check us out on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. God damn it. just hate the sound of my own voice.
Yeah, we all do. You're not alone.
That is a lie.
I love the sound of my voice. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you both for joining us. So now next episode you guys are on, we're going to be talking about Los Bandoleros and Fast and Furious number 4 from 2009. Well, very exciting, very big episode next time, so get ready for that. But Joe, as we talked about next episode, we're doing Dude, Where's My Car?
Oh, yeah.
Hoo boy, we're getting there.
Hope you're ready.
But for all things Too Fast, Too Forever, you go to cageclub.me, facebook.com/TooFastTooForever, or at TooFastTooForever on Twitter and Instagram. Email us, family@cageclub.me. Check out our Patreon page at TooFastTooForever.com. Find the next 3 laps. Give us movies to watch. And come back next episode for Dude, Where's My Car? Come back in 2 weeks to hear Nico and Kevo once again talking about Fast and Furious, talking about Fast and Furious number 4 and Los Bandoleros. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
And I'm Joe, too.
And that was Nico Vasilo and Kevo Risse of Husbands Talking More or Less. And we'll see you next time right here on Too Fast, Too Forever. Peace out.
Peace out.
You anus piecers.